I was driving on Highway 90, cutting through the West Texas countryside. It was close to midnight. I had just left San Antonio after a late shift at the food processing plant, aiming to get to Del Rio before sunrise. This road is empty during the day, but now it felt like it was swallowing the car whole in the darkness. On top of that, a heavy rain started pouring down. Water hammered the windshield violently, and the wipers worked non-stop. Even though I knew the road was deserted, I had to slow way down because it was so slick. Suddenly, in the beam of my headlights, I saw a small figure standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on the wet pavement and stopped about 10 feet from the figure. My heart was pounding. It was a girl, maybe 10 years old, with long, soaked hair plastered to her face. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, and she was shaking. I immediately brought the girl inside the car, cranked up the heat, and quickly wiped her down with a small towel to help her warm up. I asked her if she was okay. "She wants to kill me," she said, her voice trembling like she was about to cry. I didn't understand what she meant, but didn't ask any more questions. I quickly drove away. I decided to take her to the nearest police station. Looking in the rearview mirror, I saw her huddled in the corner of the seat, still shivering. I asked her name, and she softly whispered, "Kate." Kate said she had run away from a house where someone was holding her captive. Her voice was broken and sounded truly pitiful. I was about to ask more questions when the car radio cut in with a breaking news announcement. The announcer's serious voice cut through the sound of the rain, giving an emergency alert for areas along Highway 90. A dangerous inmate had escaped from the state mental health facility at 8 p.m. The suspect was severely mentally disturbed and had a history of violence. The police advised the public not to make contact and to report immediately if spotted. I paused for a moment and then glanced into the rear view mirror. Kate was still sitting there, head down, her face hidden by her hair. Then a thought flashed through my mind, and I immediately asked the girl, "The she you talked about? Could it be that mental patient?" Kate didn't answer and started crying. I felt confused and thought how stupid I was. How would the kid know? I reached for my jacket pocket on the passenger seat to grab my phone. I would call the police first to report the situation. The screen lit up, then went dark right away. Damn it, the battery died right now. I had forgotten the charger at home. Remembering a gas station was about 9 miles away, I planned to stop there to call the police. After 15 minutes, I saw the red and white neon lights of the gas station. The 24-hour convenience store sign was still lit. I pulled in, parking right in front of the store entrance. I told Kate to stay in the car and promised to buy her some candy when I came back. She nodded, still not looking up. I got out of the car and ran into the store. I quickly told the clerk I needed to use the phone urgently, that I had just found a soaking wet child on the road. I dialed 911 and quickly recounted everything. After the call ended, I looked out at my car, and Kate was still sitting quietly in the back seat. I went to buy a few pieces of candy as promised, then heard the sound of police cars screeching into the parking lot. I ran outside to meet them. The officer asked me where I'd found the child. I pointed towards my car. "The kid is in the car right there." I found her 5 miles east, standing in the middle of the road, soaked and terrified. He nodded and walked toward my car. When the officer opened the door and shined his flashlight inside, the back seat was empty. I stood there, stunned. The kid, she was just sitting there. My voice trembled. They checked the other door and reported it was unlocked. The flashlight beam swept around the parking lot, but no one was seen. I looked around in confusion. The officer turned back to me, his eyes full of scrutiny. The silence lasted a few seconds. "Are you sure there was a child in the car?" he asked, his voice full of suspicion. "Yes, I swear," I quickly explained. I was driving on Highway 90 when I saw her standing in the middle of the road, soaked head to toe. I asked if she was okay and gave her a ride. She said her name was Kate and that someone wanted to kill her. I planned to take her to the station, but my phone died, so I stopped here to call first. I told her to wait in the car. I even promised to buy her candy. I spoke fast, trying to recall every detail. Described the child to me. The officer's voice was still cold. A girl, about 10 years old, skinny, long hair, wearing a white t-shirt and jeans. I recounted every detail I remembered, hoping they would believe me. The two officers exchanged a look, then picked up a tablet and turned it toward me. "Does she look like this?" On the screen was a photo of a woman with long brown hair and a round face. Below it were the details. Rachel, 34 years old, wanted fugitive. I stared intently at the picture. I got goosebumps. Ignoring the age, if I imagined this person soaking wet, appearing smaller in the dim light and the rain. The face was horrifyingly similar. A round face, big eyes, small build. It was exactly Kate. My voice trailed off. "This is the girl I just picked up." "This is not a child," the officer said. "She is the escaped inmate the radio was just warning about. She has a rare hormone disorder that makes her look like a child. She uses this to approach her victims." I took a step back, my legs suddenly weak. I'd been alone for 15 minutes, with a dangerous criminal the police were hunting throughout the region. The person I had just rescued, the one I felt sorry for and wanted to protect, was a murderer. The officer spoke into his radio, asking for backup, reporting the suspect was nearby. He turned and told me to get inside the store and stay there until they found her. I looked out at the dark parking lot. Somewhere out there, she was hiding. I thought about the big eyes looking at me through the rear view mirror the whole ride. About the trembling voice of a scared child begging to be saved. It had all been a perfect act, and I had completely fallen for it. This is a story about what I went through during my nursing internship. My best friend from class, Sarah, and I were assigned to a psychiatric hospital for our clinical rotation. It was a small medical facility located in a remote part of rural Pennsylvania, so we rented a room nearby for convenience. On the first day, the charge nurse, who was our preceptor, gave us a tour and explained the rules we had to follow. The hospital was strangely quiet. The atmosphere felt heavy and stifling, maybe because it was a locked, closed-off treatment unit. The preceptor repeated one rule over and over. No matter which patient it is, absolutely do not listen to or believe anything they say. Just ignore them. After about a week of work, we started getting used to the routine. Most of the patients seemed pretty normal, so we gradually let down our initial guard. One afternoon, I happened to hear staff members talking about a patient named Margaret, who was classified as needing special management. They said she had killed her husband and 2 young kids 6 years ago, but was declared insane to avoid the death penalty. This patient was kept on the 4th floor, an area where interns like us were strictly forbidden to enter. We didn't pay much attention to it, thinking that the assigned nurses would handle everything, and our job was just to finish our tasks and clock out. One evening, as we were getting ready to leave, I briefly saw a strange woman in a nurse's uniform walking out. She turned back and looked at me for a second, and I swear she smiled. I figured it was a way of saying hello. I guessed she was the nurse assigned to check on the patient on the 4th floor. While we were completing our end-of-shift tasks, Sarah and I suddenly heard shouting. Margaret Hayes escaped. We quickly ran out and saw a patient lying on the floor. The woman claimed to be a doctor, but she looked completely panicked. "I'm the doctor! Margaret injected me with something." Right then, the preceptor's warning echoed in my mind. Under any circumstances, don't pay attention to what they say. We assumed the screaming woman was having a psychotic episode, so we took her to the isolation room. She kept trying to explain, but of course we ignored her. After completing the incident report, we clocked out. As soon as we got back to our place, my friend received an urgent call from the hospital. Her voice was shaking. "Something serious has happened." We immediately rushed back to the hospital and were stunned when we learned the truth. The woman we had locked in the isolation room was actually a doctor from another hospital who had come for a consultation. The patient Margaret had resisted, injected her with a sedative, swapped clothes with her, and successfully escaped. So, the strange woman we saw earlier, that was Margaret? I gasped after realizing everything. I couldn't help but shiver as I remembered her smile that afternoon. We never found out what happened next in the story. All we knew was that we weren't held responsible, and the incident was never discussed again. After the incident, we were still in shock and doubted everything. The hospital made us sign a non-disclosure agreement. They brought in a lawyer, and she explained that this was the best thing for everyone. We signed it. I couldn't sleep for many nights afterward. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Margaret smile, the gentle, confident smile of someone who knew they had won. She had taken advantage of the very thing they taught us: never trust the patient. And that exact rule had become the perfect escape route for her. Sarah felt the same way. We sat silently in our rented room, not talking to each other. The guilt weighed heavier than any explanation. We had followed protocol, but that right thing led to an irreversible consequence. A few weeks later, when things had quieted down, I accidentally came across an old article being reshared online. The headline sent a chill down my spine. "Woman declared insane pleads for justice. I didn't kill my husband and children. I'm the only survivor." Attached to the article was an old photo of Margaret Hayes before she was institutionalized. A young woman, her eyes tired but not crazy. She recounted that she woke up that day to find her whole family murdered, and the only person present at the scene was her. No one believed her, and there was no evidence to defend her. Only the doctors declared her mentally ill. I read the article down to the last line. In my mind, Margaret's image reappeared with that faint smile. At that moment, was she really the psychopathic killer everyone claimed she was? Or just a woman who had become utterly desperate? The internship ended sooner than planned. As I left Pennsylvania, I wasn't sure I could continue down this path anymore. There are rules to protect us, but sometimes those very rules can turn us into accomplices to something terrible. To this day, I still wonder, where is Margaret? When I was 9, I made up a game to play with my 2 best friends. The rule was simple. Instead of saying hello with our names, we would say the name of the best thing we had eaten that day. For example, if I had a really good pancake for breakfast that my mom made, when I saw my friends, I would say, "Pancake has arrived." Mia might choose mac and cheese, and Luke would pick a hot dog. We would laugh so hard every time we met, arguing over who picked the best food. The suburb we lived in was very quiet. Everyone was friendly, but there was one man that nobody wanted to get close to. We didn't know his name. He lived alone in the house at the end of the street. His clothes were always stained, and his long hair was matted and greasy, along with a thick beard that covered half his face. He usually took walks by himself in the afternoon and never spoke to anyone. But the creepiest thing wasn't his dirty appearance. It was his smile, a constant, fixed, rigid smile. His eyes were wide open and stared without blinking. It gave anyone who saw it the chills. Our parents always warned us to stay away from him. No one knew what he did for a living, and no one wanted to know. The fateful afternoon happened in mid-October. We were playing tag on the lawn in front of my house. Suddenly, I felt like someone was watching me. I stopped and turned my head. The man was standing right in front of me, only a few feet away. He stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the three of us. The familiar smile was still plastered on his face. My two friends also stopped. All three of us froze, too afraid to move. The air suddenly felt heavy.
Human meat has arrived.
His voice was hoarse, and it was the first time I'd ever heard him speak. We were stunned, like we had turned to stone. My two friends gasped, their eyes wide with surprise. And then he laughed. A laugh with no emotion in it whatsoever. I felt a shiver run down my spine. We turned and darted into the house. I locked the door right away. Mia was crying in fear, while Luke and I ran to the window to watch. The man was still standing there, looking towards the house. His smile hadn't changed. After a while, he finally left. Mia and Luke called their parents to come pick them up. We didn't plan it, but none of us told our parents what had happened that afternoon. In the days that followed, we still played the naming game, but we weren't as excited as before. His words kept haunting my mind. A few days later, the news was on every local TV channel. A middle school student in the city is missing. It was Lauren, a girl who went to the same school as us. Lauren's family posted missing flyers everywhere, and lots of police and volunteers were out searching for her. The incident shocked the whole neighborhood, especially since the victim was a kid. My parents were really worried. My mom set a curfew, not allowing me to leave the house after 5 p.m., especially not to go anywhere without an adult. Luke and Mia were the same. We were so bored because we couldn't play together often anymore. The usually peaceful neighborhood gradually became gloomy with a heavy atmosphere. Then one morning, people started buzzing. The man at the end of the street had disappeared. Besides those who were curious, many parents felt a sense of relief. My mom was a perfect example, but things weren't that simple. That same day, the police swarmed and cordoned off the man's house at the end of the street. They carried a lot of things out of the house. A large crowd gathered outside, whispering and talking. Then came another shocking piece of news. The police found Lauren's belongings in the man's house. There was a backpack with Lauren's name printed on it, a pair of sneakers, and a jacket. He immediately became the prime suspect. Police issued a statewide warrant for his arrest, but he had completely vanished. No one ever saw him again. We were too young then to really understand, but we all knew what happened was not simply a bad person doing bad things. It took a very long time for me to figure out the horrible meaning hidden behind the sentence. Human meat has arrived. It was a confession in disguise. Maybe he had watched us playing that game many times, and when he appeared that day, he wanted to play along, wanted to announce his favorite food according to the rules of the game we had created. Or even scarier, he was choosing his next meal to be one of the three of us. Lauren might very well have been the food he was talking about. After that, the game ended. No one said anything. No one mentioned it again, as if silence would make everything disappear. but it didn't. It remained deeply ingrained in our minds. From then on, I started being cautious about everything. It took me a long time to trust someone just because they smiled kindly, and it wasn't until I was an adult that I dared to say the name of my favorite food without getting a chill. It was a cold, rainy night. It was around 2 a.m., and the temperature outside was about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. We had just left a fun party and were driving home. We were on a desolate, dark road that runs alongside the Rogue River in Belmont, Michigan. Suddenly, my friend who was driving gasped and stared straight ahead. My friend in the back seat and I quickly looked too, and we saw it. A figure was crawling on the pavement ahead, inching forward. "Is that a person or an animal?" I asked, my voice shaking. We drove closer. My friend at the wheel didn't slow down, but quickly swerved to avoid the thing. Our headlights illuminated it in a flash, and we zipped past. It looked like a woman, her hair matted and covering her face. Her clothes were soaked, and she was crawling in a bizarre way. She looked like a giant spider scuttling across the asphalt. No one spoke for a few seconds. All we heard was the car's engine and our own heavy breathing. After a quick argument, we turned the car around. Our main feeling wasn't curiosity. It was that our conscience wouldn't let us abandon someone in that kind of situation. When we came back, we saw her more clearly. It was a young woman, maybe in her 20s. She was hunched in the middle of the road in an unnatural crouch. Her knees were pressed together, her feet splayed out, and her body was bent forward. Her head was slowly swaying back and forth. We stopped the car a few yards from her. I stared, trying to analyze what was happening. Suddenly, she raised one hand and moved it up and down rhythmically. Then she abruptly stopped. A few seconds later, she started beating her head repeatedly with her hand. We could clearly hear the thud even inside the car. We were all startled by the woman's action. What truly sent a chill down our spines was her expression. In the headlights, we could see her eyes were abnormally wide open, but they weren't focused on anything specific. Her mouth was agape, but no sound came out. Her hair was drenched and stuck to her cheeks and neck. In that cold, there was no way a conscious person would be in that state. We decided to back up a little to observe from a safer distance. Then she started to laugh. It sounded like a terrifying mixture of a cough and a moan, echoing in the empty space. My friend in the back screamed, "Drive! Drive now!" But the driver didn't react. I couldn't take my eyes off the woman either. She stopped laughing and started crawling toward us. She maintained that bizarre posture, arms and legs straight, head low to the ground, yet her face remained fixed on us. The distance between us shrank. I could hear her raspy breathing. My friend quickly slammed the car into reverse. The tires squealed and we backed up about 30 feet, but the woman didn't stop. She kept crawling toward us, one movement after another, maintaining her pace. Then she suddenly froze, completely motionless like a statue. We stopped the car, watching for a moment longer. We all held our breath, not daring to move. Then, as if someone had flipped a power switch, the woman collapsed straight down onto the road. Her body hit the pavement with a heavy thud. Immediately following was the loud impact of her head hitting the road. I winced, imagining how much that must have hurt. I quickly grabbed my phone and called 911, trying to describe what we had just witnessed. But I struggled with the words. She was crawling weirdly. She was hitting her own head, then laughing, and now she's lying still. The dispatcher tried to calm me down, telling us to stay in the car and wait. While waiting, I couldn't take my eyes off the figure lying on the road. About 10 minutes later, the police and an ambulance arrived. Paramedics rushed over to check the girl's vital signs. I saw them talking urgently to each other, and they quickly placed her on a stretcher. As they lifted her, I caught one last glimpse of her face. Her eyes were still wide but unfocused. A police officer came over to get information from us. My brain was trying to process everything we had just seen. We were allowed to leave after about 20 minutes of talking with the police. A few hours later, after it was light out, I drove back to the scene alone. What I noticed was some freshly disturbed dirt along the riverbank near the road. This suggested that she had most likely fallen into the Rogue River and struggled to swim onto the road just minutes before our car passed. Over the next few days, the story slowly came together. The woman was named Angela, 28, a student attending Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, over 200 miles away. She had been reported missing 2 days before we encountered her. Angela's friend said that before she disappeared, she constantly talked about feeling like someone was following her. She was always in a state of high stress and on edge. When she finally woke up in the hospital, doctors explained that Angela had experienced a state of dissociative fugue. This is the brain's defense mechanism when a person faces levels of stress and fear that exceed their coping ability. The brain, unable to process the continuous horror, chooses to disconnect from reality. In this state, patients completely forget their identity. They don't know where they are or what they're doing. They can perform complex actions, like driving a car, but have no conscious awareness of those actions. Some studies suggest that patients in this state may experience hallucinations, hearing voices, or seeing images that don't exist, and acting on invisible commands. The brain creates an alternative reality to avoid confronting the true fear. Angela had been living in that alternative reality for 2 days. She drove aimlessly, without eating or sleeping. Then somehow, she ended up in the Rogue River. The shock of the freezing water must have roused a part of her consciousness enough for her to crawl onto the road, but not enough to fully regain awareness. I still clearly remember Angela's vacant eyes and her strange actions. What exactly had she gone through for her brain to simply stop processing? Angela physically recovered, but she remembers nothing about those 2 days. She went to sleep on a Friday night and woke up in the hospital on a Monday, completely bewildered. I still occasionally drive past that stretch of road at night. I wonder if there is anyone else wandering out there, someone trapped in a fuzzy world, no longer themselves. Have any of you ever experienced or known someone with dissociative fugue? If so, please share your story below. Perhaps your story will help others recognize the warning signs before it's too late. I remember that time my finances were really tight. I had to work several jobs at once. For the New Year's holiday, I took a house-sitting job through a gig finder app. The pay was a lot better, because few people wanted to work on New Year's Eve. The homeowners were a middle-aged couple. They said they needed someone to look after the house and Charlie while they went to a party. I drove to the address right on time. When I arrived, the front door was slightly ajar. I pushed the door open, called out loudly, but no one answered. The house was so quiet, I could clearly hear the clock ticking. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the homeowner. We had a slight emergency and left already. Charlie is in the last room down the hall on the second floor. Please don't go near him. Charlie is very sensitive and easily scared of strangers. Just make sure he's safe and doesn't break anything. Thanks a ton. I flipped on a light and looked around the house. It wasn't very clean, and most of the furniture was old. I went upstairs to Charlie's room on the second floor for a quick check. The door was closed. I put my ear to the door and heard steady breathing inside. Charlie must be asleep. I thought to myself, great, this is easier than I expected. I went back downstairs, sat on the sofa in the living room, and opened my laptop to work. A long time passed, and I got so absorbed in my work that I completely forgot where I was. My phone buzzed again. It was the homeowner calling. She worriedly asked about Charlie. I told her Charlie had been sleeping soundly since I arrived. There were a few seconds of silence on the line, and then she spoke, sounding quite surprised. "He's being that good? That's strange. Could you go up and check on him for me? But remember to keep your distance, don't get too close." I was a little puzzled by this warning. Thinking back, I had forgotten to ask her for any information about Charlie. I went up to the room at the end of the second floor again, this time with a different feeling. I felt a little curious for some reason. I gently pushed the door open to look inside. The room light was off. The light from the hallway shined in, and I saw a figure lying on the bed, covered completely by a blanket. A faint foul smell wafting from the room made me wrinkle my nose. It wasn't overpowering, but it was enough to be unpleasant. I took a few more steps inside. The breathing was coming from the bed, but I only just noticed it wasn't steady. It was a raspy, labored breath, short and difficult. My heart started beating faster. Something wasn't right. I fumbled around for the light switch and flipped it on. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I clearly saw the person in the bed. It was not a child. It was an elderly man, so frail that his ribs were visible through his torn t-shirt. His skin was wrinkled and pale. His breathing was weak, like it was about to stop. I froze, and a series of questions raced through my mind. Was this the boy named Charlie the homeowner mentioned? Or was there some other secret? It was very possible that he was being abused by his own children. Right. That must be why she kept mentioning that I shouldn't get close to Charlie. I backed out of the room, my hand shaking as I called the homeowner back. Charlie is not a child. It's an old man. He's lying in bed and looks really unwell. The homeowner was silent. Then her voice became confused. "An old man? What are you talking about? Charlie is our dog. We just adopted him last week. He barks a lot and chews things up, which is why I told you to keep your distance." At that, a shiver ran down my spine. I quickly reopened the text message and looked closely at the address. Disastrously, I had gone to the wrong address. I stood there stunned for a few more seconds until I heard the homeowner's loud voice calling through the phone. I quickly apologized and promised I would be at her house in 20 minutes after making sure the elderly man was safe. I called 911. About 10 minutes later, the police and ambulance arrived. They carried the elderly man out on a stretcher. I watched with mixed feelings. A police officer came over and shared some information about the man after searching their database. He was 74, lived alone, and was a bit of an eccentric. That's why the neighbors around rarely paid attention to him. The officer asked about my relationship with the old man. I gave a forced smile and decided to tell the whole story of my mix-up. "Thank you so much for saving him. Sometimes mistakes don't lead to disastrous results, right?" The officer patted my shoulder. They said I was free to leave. I immediately remembered my actual job for the night. I rushed to the correct house. It was nearly midnight. But as I stepped inside, I heard loud barking from upstairs. I sighed in relief and thought to myself, this must be the right house. I don't do those kinds of odd jobs anymore. The memory of that night wasn't exactly terrifying, but it certainly left me with a lot to think about. I have been a firefighter for 12 years, but the cruelest thing is that I couldn't save my own wife. A year ago, I was on an overnight shift. My house caught fire because of a faulty furnace. When I finally got home, it was too late. My wife died from smoke inhalation. My son survived because his bedroom was at the end of the hall. David was 9. He remembered and felt the horror of that night very clearly. For the first few months after the funeral, I thought I could handle everything. I promised I would take care of David and make up for his mom's loss. I woke up early to make his breakfast. It was usually simple stuff, like toast and eggs. He had become very withdrawn after the accident. He would sit, look at his breakfast, and then look at me. If Mom were here, I wouldn't have to eat the same 4 meals every week, right? I froze, looking at him, unable to say anything. That day, he decided to skip breakfast and just go to school. On the way to work, I started crying again. I only let myself cry in the car. I missed my wife so much, and I felt so completely helpless. The same questions kept repeating in my head. Why didn't I come home earlier? Why didn't I notice the furnace was broken? Since the accident, I started volunteering for the most dangerous missions. Each time I rushed into a fire, I felt a slight sense of relief, as if I was making amends for Sarah's death. But every time I came home and saw my son sitting alone in the living room, I felt scared. I didn't know how to talk to him. Then October came, and it was the day of David's school field day. I had promised him I would be there to cheer him on. That morning, I woke up early to pack his lunch. I made his mom's grilled chicken salad, which David always loved. But then the station got an emergency call. I quickly shoved the lunchbox into my bag and rushed out to the scene. The entire time I was on the job, I couldn't stop thinking about David. Luckily, I didn't arrive too late, but it was already past lunchtime. The stadium was loud, filled with laughter and cheers. Lots of parents were there, rooting for their kids. I found David sitting by himself, constantly looking down at the ground. I walked over quickly, trying to force a smile. David, Dad's here. He looked up at me. There was no emotion in his eyes. I sat down next to him, trying to keep my voice cheerful. I'm so sorry I'm late. We had a big emergency at the station, but I brought lunch. I opened my bag and took out the lunchbox. But when I lifted the lid, I froze. The food was a messy jumble. The dressing had spilled out, sticking to the sides of the container. The box must have gotten knocked around while I rushed out to the call. Dad tried to make the dish your mom always made. But David looked at the ruined lunch and then at me. This time I saw an emotion in his eyes, but it was just disappointment. If Mom was alive, everything would be different. All Dad knows how to do is burn things down. That sentence felt like falling into an abyss. I couldn't get a single word out because I knew he was right. I went back to the station and thought about my wife. I wished she could come back. I took 2 tranquilizers and drifted off to sleep. And then the dream came again. I saw my wife lying in the ashes. Her hair was burnt, her facial skin was cracked, and her eye sockets were 2 empty black holes. She crawled toward me, each movement slow and painful. I smelled the burnt odor coming from her black, partially missing fingers. Why didn't you get here in time? Why did you abandon me? I woke up with a gasp, trying to calm myself down. The clock showed 3 a.m., and I tossed and turned until morning. On the nights that followed, the dream kept repeating. Sometimes I saw myself standing in front of the burning house, hearing my wife and son calling for help inside, but I couldn't move. The fire swallowed everything. Thick black smoke billowed from the windows, and I just stood there, helpless. I started to be afraid of going to sleep, I took more tranquilizers every night, but they only made the nightmares more real. They didn't make them go away. I knew my body was breaking down, but I couldn't tell anyone. David wasn't doing any better. He was getting thinner by the day. His teacher called and said he always sat alone in class, sometimes staring out the window with an empty look. I was truly helpless. Both of us were trapped in our own private pain. The next morning, I was at the station when we got a call about a fire at David's school. I immediately bolted to the parking lot. My colleagues called out to me, but I didn't listen. All I could see was the image of my son trapped in the flames. I had only one thought. I won't lose anyone else this time. When I got to the school, the fire had already spread to the second floor. The scene was pure chaos. I jumped out of the truck, grabbed my oxygen mask, and ran straight into the fire. David's classroom was at the end of the hall. The smoke was so dense, I could only see a few feet in front of me. I crawled on the floor, yelling my son's name. The fire crackled, and the ceilings groaned, signaling they were about to collapse. I crawled even faster. At the end of the hall, I saw him huddled in a corner. When he heard my voice, he opened his eyes. I crawled to him, hugged him, took off my turnout coat, and wrapped David inside it. Then I stood up and ran. Flames leaped up on both sides, but I didn't stop. I held my son tight and ran straight through the fire. Thank God we made it out. We both collapsed onto the grass. My crew immediately helped, and the ambulance was right there. I heard David crying and repeatedly calling for Dad. I held him, whispering, "I'm sorry I wasn't there when your mom and you needed me most." David hugged me back, and in that moment, I felt a sense of relief. David and I both had some burns, but luckily, nothing serious. No one died in the fire. That's truly the best outcome for firefighters like us. That night, in the hospital room, David slept on the bed next to me. Sleep was no longer terrifying for me. I saw our familiar kitchen, and my wife was standing by the stove. She was making the grilled chicken salad. She looked at me and smiled. "Thank you for not giving up. I know I can't change the past, but I still have a chance to get things right now." We will always carry the memory of our happy family of 3. Some wounds never completely heal, but a strong enough love can help us learn how to keep moving forward, even with the burns still in our hearts. I had never used Craigslist until about a month ago. That might sound strange to some people, but honestly, I never felt the need to buy anything used from someone else when I could just buy it at a store. Because of this, I didn't truly understand how dangerous that website can sometimes be until a recent incident. While I don't consider myself too tech-savvy, one thing I have loved since I was a kid is remote-controlled RC planes. To me, RC vehicles are truly awesome and fascinating. A while back, I bought a Blue Angel 64mm EDFR-TF jet, which cost me about $150. But it wasn't long before I noticed a problem with the plane. After a quick check, I found that the receiver had burnt out. I angrily called the store where I bought the plane. They told me I couldn't get a refund, and a new receiver for my specific model would cost $45. I demanded an explanation for why the circuitry on my brand new plane was faulty, but the person on the other end just told me to stop by later if I wanted to buy the new receiver. I didn't accept that, ended the call, and searched for a new receiver on Craigslist. To my surprise, I found exactly what I was looking for right away. I figured it was good luck and immediately contacted the seller. I'll call him John. John and I talked first on the phone. He was very eager to make the sale. We agreed to meet 3 days later at a park. When the day of the sale came, I was excited. The thought of flying my new plane was really appealing. We arranged to meet at 7 p.m. Just as I was about to leave, John called. He said there was a change of plans and we would have to meet outside a convenience store. This seemed a little odd, but I agreed anyway. When I arrived at the location, it was 7:15 p.m. I was ready to apologize to John, but I didn't see him. I told myself, he must be running late too. As I waited outside, it started to get cold. I decided to get in my car and wait in the parking lot. I listened to music for a while and dozed off. When I woke up and looked at the clock, it was almost 9:30 p.m. I checked my phone and saw a missed call from John. I called him back and apologized profusely. I waited for John to respond, but there was no answer. Strangely, he just ended the call abruptly. Feeling confused and slightly unsettled, I decided to wait a little longer. I observed that the parking lot was completely empty. I waited for at least 20 more minutes, but received no call. I called John one more time. This time he picked up and wasn't silent. "I'm so sorry. I'm going to be late," he said over the phone, his voice sounding genuine. "I really didn't mean to inconvenience you like this. I'll take something off the price of the receiver to make up for it, okay?" "Oh no, that's fine. I'm still here. I'll wait." "Thank you so much," he said, and then hung up. He seemed a little strange throughout the conversation, but I let it go. I was about to settle in for a longer wait when a horrifying realization hit me. I had been using my work phone to call John this entire time. How the heck did he get my work number? I thought back to when I was about to leave the house, and John had called to change the location. With a feeling of intense dread, I realized he had called my home landline number. I had no idea how he got a hold of me on that number. Even more chilling, my landline had rung the moment I walked past it, as if he knew exactly where I was in the house when he called. My first thought was to drive home and call the police. But what would I say? That someone called to say they would be late? I felt like that was exactly what John wanted. Instead of running, I walked into the convenience store. I must have entered very quickly because the cashier jumped. My level of paranoia was increasing by the second. It was almost 11 o'clock. Why was this person taking so long? I realized I should have asked why he wanted to change the location. I splashed cold water on my face in the restroom and walked out. The cashier looked at me disbelievingly, his face pale, his movements erratic. "Is something wrong?" I asked. He replied, "I just saw you get into your car. How are you in here?" He started panicking and hyperventilating. "I think someone is following me. Call the police. Call them right now." He picked up the phone and dialed the emergency number. Just then, the lights went out. A faint orange emergency light illuminated the walls. The cashier crumpled down, whimpering. I was thrown into confusion. I crawled through the aisles until I found a small camping knife to defend myself. I looked out the window. John still hadn't shown up. I told myself I needed to call the police on my own phone. I dialed 911, explained everything, and gave my location. The police would be there in 10 minutes or less. I crawled over to the delirious cashier. Somehow, through his rambling, I heard the words "furniture" and "saw you." I peeked over at the furniture store across the street. I figured John was definitely watching me from there. When he saw the cashier pick up the phone, he had somehow cut the power. I checked the cashier's pulse. It was too fast. I realized John had somehow poisoned this guy. He had set me up from the start and anticipated my every move. Whatever sick plan he had for me, I was going to ruin it. I started looking around the store and memorizing every exit and entrance. The goal was to stall this bastard until the police arrived. Suddenly, I heard a car pull up. My first instinct was to lift my head and look out the window, but I stopped myself. I crawled to the door and got ready to take him out if he stepped inside. He had lured me here, tried to cut me off from the authorities, and probably killed the cashier. He wanted to kill me and had the complete advantage. I waited and then heard footsteps on the pavement getting closer. This was it. It was about to end. The door swung open, and with lightning speed, I swung the blunt end of the knife handle at his head. I heard John yell, but after 3 more hits, he was unconscious. I saw flashing red and blue lights. 2 police cars pulled into the parking lot, and officers got out. It was finally over. I had survived. I dropped the knife and stood up. I let them arrest me, knowing I had evidence and a witness to prove this man had tried to kill me. The lights came back on, and I got my first clear look at the scene. The police said the man I had nearly killed was not John. It was the owner of the convenience store who decided to stop by for a surprise check without knowing what awaited him. But that wasn't all. The cashier was affected by 4 different types of hallucinogens and sedatives. They found ecstasy in his pocket and marijuana under the counter. He had been tripping since I walked in. The sweating and erratic movements were a result of drug use. The cashier almost died from an overdose, not from being poisoned by John. This meant everything I thought was wrong. John was never here. As for John, finding my work and landline numbers, the answer was right on the Craigslist profile. I had listed all my phone numbers. When I called John to say I was late, he had accidentally hit the mute button. So he heard me, but I didn't hear him. When I called back the second time, he had just been in a minor fender bender. By the time John sorted it out, it was already dark. The power outage when the cashier was about to call the police was also an insane coincidence. The store lost power several times a week because of insect infestation in the main fuse box. The high cashier had collapsed due to the sudden change in light, which only heightened my paranoia. And finally, John never intended to meet me at that convenience store. I had driven to the wrong location. John actually planned to meet me at a convenience store 14 miles away. In my excitement, I had taken the wrong freeway exit. John was supposed to call me to check in, but his phone had died. John had never met me and had no intention of harming anyone. He was just an RC plane enthusiast like me. After the incident, I was taken to the emergency room. Doctor said I had an acute panic attack with hallucinations due to extreme stress. They explained that the combination of lack of sleep, anxiety, and a strange environment had caused my brain to fill in the blanks with irrational thoughts. I was not investigated or prosecuted because both the doctors and the police confirmed I was in a state of severe psychological distress. The store owner was fortunately only slightly injured, and he was very understanding of my situation. I apologized to him many times afterward. The cashier also recovered after going through detox and treatment. And John? He didn't even know about the whole thing until I called to apologize for flaking. He was confused but very kind, and even agreed to meet me another time to deliver the receiver. This time, I made sure I went to the right address. I am currently undergoing therapy to manage my emotions better. The doctor said I was lucky to have recognized the problem early. If you hear this story, be careful with your mental health. Don't let stress and tension push you to the brink. And yes, be careful on Craigslist, but maybe not to the extent I was. I am watching TV. The news is covering a case involving the singer Taylor. The court just issued a 5-year restraining order against a stalker. He had gone to her house multiple times, even bringing a glass bottle as a weapon, and claimed they had children together. The spokesperson said this wasn't the first time she had faced this kind of situation. This incident reminds me of my own story from 3 years ago. I was 17 then, and pretty popular on Instagram under the name @dear.emily. Thinking about it now still gives me the chills. Back then, I had over 70,000 followers. That number wasn't because of any special talent. I spent a lot of time studying how to use photo editing apps skillfully. My photos showed flawless white skin, large round eyes, and full lips. Everything was carefully planned, from the angle to the lighting. I looked like an eye-catching mature model, while in real life, I was a pretty isolated high school girl. Every time I posted a photo, I waited for the compliments like an addict waiting for a fix. I read every single comment, smiling at each piece of praise. The number of likes steadily climbed, and I felt like I was doing the right thing. It was success. It was the recognition I deserved. My followers were proof of my worth. The number 70,000 was much bigger than the number of students at my school. They chose to follow me among millions of other accounts. At school, I didn't tell my friends about the account. They would get jealous or cause trouble for my popularity. My parents were quite strict. They always talked about studying and the future. They would take away my phone and call what I was doing frivolous, but they didn't understand. I didn't need anyone to truly understand me. As long as I was still admired online and my follower count kept growing, I was completely fine. That's what I told myself every night before sleeping, after checking one last time for any new comments. My next goal was to hit 100,000 followers. That number felt like a milestone to prove that more and more people cared about me. And when I achieved that, I wanted a white, limited edition Gucci GG Marmont small matelassé bag. It cost nearly $3,000, an impossible number with my allowance. But I deserved it. I had worked hard to build this perfect image. I needed people to pay me back for my hard work. One night, after failing to figure out a way to make the money, I decided to post a subtle request. I couldn't outright ask for the bag. That would be tacky. I just posted a picture of the Gucci with the caption, "A wish for one day." Inside, I hoped a fan would get the hint. They could spend a little to make me happy. I deserved to be loved that much. 2 days later, an account messaged me. The person said they had been following me for a long time and wanted to gift me the bag. No need to meet, no demands. Just tell them the address of an automated locker for package delivery, and they would send it there. I had to try really hard not to scream with joy, but I didn't want to look too eager, so I set a timer and waited 15 minutes before replying to the message. Finally, someone understood that I deserved the best things. I didn't even feel embarrassed or worried. It was just a small gift from a fan, the way real celebrities receive them every day. The bag arrived exactly as promised. When I opened the box, I couldn't hold back a shriek of happiness. It lay there, perfect in every refined detail. I hugged it like a child, a feeling of pure excitement flooding my entire body. I couldn't take my eyes off the bag. I imagined the stunning photos I would post. I had even thought of the perfect caption. Sometimes magic happens when you least expect it. I wouldn't mention who gifted it, keeping them curious and jealous. But the joy didn't last long. That evening, while I was admiring the bag, my phone vibrated. A message from the person who had sent me the bag. I opened it calmly, thinking they might ask if I had received the gift. But it wasn't a check-in. It was a photo. I shot up, my eyes wide as I stared at the screen. It was me changing clothes, only wearing underwear. The shot was from behind, low and a little blurry, but clear enough. I tried to remember. The time was this afternoon, after I got home with the bag. I had changed clothes to get ready for dinner. My heart pounded. Had I been watched? My phone vibrated again. A second photo appeared. This time, I was completely naked, walking toward my closet. Still the same angle from behind, from a low position. A scream caught in my throat. My hands shaking, I zoomed in on the picture, trying to figure out the angle. It wasn't from the window or the door. It was from a different direction. I looked around and started to cry. I was not safe in my own bedroom. The fear made me feel numbness spread through my whole body. After a few seconds, I picked up the phone again and looked very closely. In the corner of the picture was something. The symbol was the bag. I immediately looked at where the bag was placed. It was in the exact spot, facing the closet, where I usually changed clothes. Right then, the next message appeared. The bag is beautiful, right? But do you know what the real gift is? It's the truth about you. Your real face and your real identity, little girl. Delete your Instagram account now, or your 70,000 followers will see who you really are. I threw my phone onto the bed. I immediately rushed to the bag. Unlike my careful handling before, I flipped it over and found a tiny device cleverly hidden inside. The joyful feelings from earlier now turned into the most horrifying nightmare. I threw the bag and cried out. Why would someone do this to me? I was truly panicking, thinking about my real images being posted online. Everything would end. Everyone would know I was a liar. 70,000 people would laugh at me. I didn't dare tell my parents. For those 3 days, I barely slept. I constantly checked my phone, trembling every time there was a new notification. The bag was under my bed, but I still felt like it was watching me. Finally, I had to comply. My fingers shook on the screen as I hit the delete account button. I cried from an extreme feeling of emptiness. A week later, just as the nightmare hadn't quite faded, I discovered a shocking truth. I accidentally saw a notification on my mom's phone that made me freeze in place. It was the exact account that had gifted me the bag. I knew my mom's phone password and unlocked it. It was the same account. The entire conversation with me was still there. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down. The whole thing was a setup orchestrated by my mother. The person who made me live in fear for the past week was my own mom. I hated my mother fiercely in that moment. She had destroyed the only thing that made me feel valuable. I didn't speak to my mom for months afterward. Every time I saw her, I felt angry and hurt. My mom didn't explain either. She just looked at me with a sad gaze, as if she were waiting for something. Now I understand everything my mother did was for me. She saw that I was lost, living in a virtual world, trading my real identity for admiration from strangers. I was willing to accept gifts from strangers, putting myself in danger because of greed and an illusion about my self-worth. If the person who sent the bag hadn't been my mom but a malicious stalker, what happened to me would have been much worse. My mother gave me the most painful lesson, but it was also the lesson that saved my life. I looked up at the TV screen. Taylor has faced many stalkers, but she has an entire security team, lawyers, and resources to defend herself. And me? A 17-year-old girl with 70,000 followers, and nobody who truly knew what I looked like. Now I no longer have an account with thousands of followers, but I have a happy life. I realized I always have my family nearby to share with. I always have friends who welcome me with sincerity. Real connections in life are what we need, not the empty concern and fake compliments on social media. I am grateful that the person who taught me the most valuable lesson is the person who loves me the most. When I bought the small house in New Orleans, I was living my dream. It was a house on the edge of a canal, backing right up to the water, with its own boat dock in the backyard. From my back deck, I could take just a few steps, drop my fishing boat into the water, and paddle off any time. The two families next door were very friendly. They helped me move things in, and even brought over an apple pie as a welcome. Everything was going smoothly. However, there was one issue I hadn't thought about before signing the contract. On the other side of the canal, only about 60 feet of water away, there was another row of houses, and their backyards looked directly into mine. This meant that privacy in the backyard was almost non-existent. When I was fishing, when I was making coffee in the kitchen, or even just standing on the back steps, I could clearly see what the people on the other side were doing, and vice versa. That house didn't look very well maintained. The paint was peeling in many spots, and the grass was overgrown. Every time I looked over, I felt annoyed because it was an eyesore in this otherwise neat neighborhood. Almost 2 weeks after moving in, I started noticing that the house across the way was always dark. Not a single light turned on, even at night. I figured maybe no one lived there, or it was for sale. Then one day, my brother came over to help me put my boat in the water for the first time. We worked until dark, and when he drove away, I stayed on the dock for a moment to admire our work. That's when I looked up and saw a light turn on in the house across the canal. In what looked like the living room, a man was standing right next to the window, looking out. He was wearing sweatpants and looked middle-aged. I could clearly see his face was turned toward me. I didn't know how to react. Waving seemed weird in this situation, so I just went inside and tried not to think much of it. The next day when I got home from work, I decided to plant some grass in the backyard to make the area look greener. As I was busy with the plants, I had the feeling that someone was watching me. When I looked up, I saw the man from yesterday standing at his back door. This time, there was no doubt he was observing me. We stared at each other for a few seconds. I tried to act normal, looked away, and continued my work. That weekend, some friends came over to my house, and we had a barbecue in the backyard. I made sure to look over at the house across the way, but didn't see the man. It was strange that, even after only seeing him twice, I had started a habit of checking if he was there every time I went into the backyard. One evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I accidentally looked out the bedroom window and saw him again, standing at his door and looking over. This time I turned off the light and stood by the window to watch. The man stood still like a statue for about 10 minutes before disappearing back inside his house. Enough is enough, I said to myself. From now on, I'd close the blinds after dark and completely ignore him. But deep down, I knew I was considering confronting him directly. Maybe I should wave or yell, "Hey, what's up?" Or even walk over there and knock on the door. Maybe just say hello like a new neighbor instead of staring at each other uncomfortably like this. But that was just a thought. What I really felt was an unsettling feeling every time I saw that man. I went back to bed and scrolled on my phone for a while. As I was about to fall asleep, I heard a noise from downstairs. Someone was walking on the wooden deck in my backyard. The footsteps were slow. I ran to the bedroom window, but from the upstairs angle, I couldn't see the corner of the backyard. Then a horrifying smashing sound came from downstairs that made me jump. I immediately called 911 and ran down to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I grabbed the largest knife in the drawer. When I looked toward the backyard window, my guess was right. Shattered glass was all over the floor, and a brick lay on the ground. I listened for a few minutes before deciding to turn on the backyard light and look out. I was terrified, thinking I'd see someone hiding in the darkness, but there was no one. He must have run away, or he hadn't intended to break into my house. 2 police officers arrived after 15 minutes. I showed them the broken window and the brick, then told them about the man across the canal. It had to be him who did this. He keeps staring at me. I have no reason to be making trouble with anyone, I told the police very confidently. We'll go over there and check it out, one of the officers said. About 20 minutes later, they came back with surprising news. No one is living in that house. We talked to the neighbors. They said the house was foreclosed by the bank months ago. The former tenants were evicted a long time ago. I froze, but I saw someone there. I saw him many times, and I saw the lights turn on. Maybe it was someone from the bank checking in, or maybe it was a prank by some kids. We recommend you install a security camera. We'll leave a patrol car parked in front of your house tonight so you feel safer. Since the police had said that, I had no further reason to convince them. The next day, I called a handyman to fix the window and install security cameras and motion detectors on both the front and back of the house. Since then, I haven't seen the man in the house across the way again. I still don't know who he was or who threw the brick through my window, but for now, things have been quiet. However, the more I think about it, the clearer my own theory becomes about the man's motive, and I'm pretty sure I'm right. He wasn't just a random, creepy stranger. It's very likely he was squatting in the foreclosed house, living there illegally, and my presence was probably a threat to him. The initial harassment, the staring, and finally the brick thrown through the window all feel like an unspoken threat intended to make me move out. If I left, he could continue to hide without suspicion. I'm not sure if I'm right, but that feeling keeps nagging at me. In every high school, there are the kids who fit in and the kids who are left out. I was just an average student, not popular, not invisible. Noah, the student this story is about, was definitely in the second group, and worse off than anyone I'd ever seen. Noah was a frequent target of bullying by everyone in school. He was known as a loner, quiet and without friends. With his thick-rimmed glasses, braces, and his haircut, he had the look of a typical nerd and was an easy mark for bullies. Overall, Noah was harmless, but that's what made him the most bullied kid in school. The situation seemed to get worse every year. At first, it was just harmless pranks like hiding Noah's books or calling him mocking nicknames. But then, things escalated. One time, I saw them shove Noah into a locker and lock the door until he had to beg to be let out. Another time, they poured milk over his head right in the middle of the cafeteria, and the whole lunchroom roared with laughter. Most recently, I heard Noah was shoved down the stairs and had to limp for a whole week. I once witnessed a terrible scene during lunch when a group of seniors was mentoring freshmen, continuing the cycle of bullying Noah like it was a tradition. No one dared to stand up for him because they were afraid of becoming the next target. However, that was when I decided to start defending Noah. This action severely damaged my own reputation, but I didn't care. I realized it made Noah's life a little easier, so I kept doing it. One day, I decided to leave my friends and sit with Noah for lunch. He had been sitting alone for years, and I wanted to change that. For the next 15 minutes, we talked casually, mostly about his physics homework and his comic books. While talking, he spoke about his comics, but not the superheroes who save people. Instead, he talked about villains, about Avengers. Noah said slowly, "People think the bad guys are cruel for no reason, but they're just people who have been pushed too far." The way he said it gave me the chills. Then Noah smiled faintly, a joyless smile, and placed his hand on the backpack next to him. I waited for the right moment and asked, "Hey Noah, How have people been treating you lately? I'm sick of them. Every single one of them, he said. I tried to calm him by asking, well, if some of them became your friends, it would be better, right? Do you consider me a friend? Noah replied, of course. Friends share secrets, right? I smiled, and Noah asked that I not reveal his secret to anyone. I froze for a few seconds, and then nodded in agreement. Okay, look in my backpack. I only saw it for a second before Noah zipped the bag shut, but I was sure of what I had just seen. I felt my chest tighten. My hands were shaking, but I quickly hid them under the table, trying to breathe normally. I swallowed hard. The dry feeling in my throat made it almost impossible to speak. I acted calm to ask the necessary questions. With every answer, I became more terrified of Noah. He said he planned to use it soon, not at a shooting range, but at school, targeting anyone who tried to stop him. Noah said all of this while remaining completely calm, as if he had been considering this for a long time. I suspected this might not be the first time Noah had brought a gun to school. When lunchtime ended, I told Noah I would see him later. I tried to walk away as calmly as possible. Our next classes were in opposite directions, so fortunately, I didn't have to walk with Noah. I maintained a normal appearance until I rounded the corner and sprinted to the office. I immediately told the story about Noah. I had no other choice, and this was truly dangerous. Less than a minute later, the lockdown alarm was activated. I watched from the office as people started screaming and running in a panic, looking for the nearest room to hide in. The police arrived shortly after and searched the school for Noah, but he wasn't there. It turned out Noah had run home as soon as the lockdown started. I guess he knew I was the one who reported him. Afterward, Noah was arrested at his house. When everything settled down, I sat alone in the office, stunned by what had just happened. I had saved everyone. I knew that. But deep down, I couldn't stop thinking about Noah. I felt guilty for him and angry at all the bullies who had pushed Noah to the edge. But I was also terrified of what might have happened if I hadn't spoken up. Since then, I have never heard or seen Noah again. I don't know how long he was in juvenile detention, but he will certainly never return to the school he intended to attack. Seeing the stories on the news about how many students have lost control because of bullying and done unthinkable things, I believe that many people could have been hurt if I hadn't acted. I and the students in that class have graduated and entered adulthood. No one knows what really happened to Noah. To this day, I still live in fear that he will one day seek me out for revenge. It was a late weekend evening in October, and I decided to stop by Popeyes to grab dinner for a perfect horror movie night. I live in an old apartment building on the outskirts of the city. It's the kind of 3-story building with long outdoor hallways that always give you a creepy, uneasy feeling after dark. I usually call a friend when I walk into the building just to feel less scared. That night was no different. I was chatting on the phone with my best friend. Just as I was stepping onto the stairs, a man suddenly came rushing down from the upper floor. He was running so fast, I only got a quick glimpse of his tall figure. I cried out and turned to the side to avoid him, but the man still slammed hard into my left shoulder, which made me stagger and almost drop my bag of food. The man turned his head and looked at me for a few seconds. I couldn't clearly see his face because his hoodie was pulled down low. Then, without a single word of apology, he continued to run off. I complained to my friend about how rude the guy was. My friend asked what happened, and I briefly explained as I continued to head upstairs. I felt like someone was watching me. I turned back, Looking through the window, down to the parking lot across the street, there was a shadowy figure, but the streetlights were too dim for me to see clearly. It was probably just someone going home. My relaxing evening went exactly as planned with the fried chicken and the scary movie. I drank a few more beers and fell asleep on the couch in the living room without realizing it. A knock on the door startled me awake. I clumsily sat up, looked at the wall clock and saw it was 9 a.m. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole and was surprised to see a police officer. I opened the door, looking groggy, and asked the officer what was going on. The man politely introduced himself as an officer from the local police station. Then he explained that there had been a murder in the apartment below mine last night, and they were interviewing all residents in the area to gather clues. My mouth dropped open. I was completely shocked, stammering and repeating the word murder. The officer asked if I had noticed anything unusual like a stranger, strange noises, or anything else. Meanwhile, he opened his notebook and held his pen ready to write. I tried to recall the night before, still in a state of shock. Truthfully, nothing seemed out of the ordinary last night. That's what I answered. The officer nodded, asked a few other questions about when I got home and what I did last night, and then left. I went back inside, utterly unable to believe there was a murder right downstairs, and I hadn't known. I needed to wash my face and take a shower to wake up properly. Just as I took off my shirt and tossed it into the laundry basket, I suddenly saw something that made me freeze in place. On the left shoulder of the shirt, there was a reddish-brown stain the size of my thumb. I picked it up to look closely and was quite sure it was dried blood. Memories from last night rushed back as clearly as a rerun of a movie. This bloodstain was exactly where the man had slammed into me last night. The following deduction made my body tremble in waves. That man was the killer, his body still covered in the victim's blood. He was fleeing the scene and collided with me. Trembling, I ran to the living room and immediately called 911. I stammered a report about a murder at my apartment complex. I gave them my apartment address. The voice on the other end suddenly grew more serious. They had not received any reports of a murder at that address, and then asked me who told me about the murder. The blood in my body seemed to turn to ice, and a cold sensation washed over me from head to toe. I replied that a person claiming to be a police officer had come this morning and said they were investigating the incident. The voice on the other end interrupted me to inform me that no police officers had been dispatched to that address this morning, and the tone switched to an emergency mode as they asked me to listen carefully. Do not open the door for anyone. Lock all windows and doors. They were sending police to my location right now. Oh God, what kind of situation was I in? My voice choked up as if I were about to cry. The dispatcher, who introduced herself as Lisa, told me to keep my mace or pepper spray with me if I had any. You are doing great. I'll stay on the line with you until the police arrive, okay? I ran to the door to check the lock. I also checked the windows. They were all tightly locked. I retreated to the corner of the room furthest from the door and sat down, trying to breathe steadily as Lisa instructed over the phone. Finally, the sound of police sirens blared from outside, and I sighed with relief. Then a loud knock on the door with a man's voice. Police! Hannah, are you there? I looked through the peephole one last time, confirming it was definitely the police before opening the door. I recounted the entire event in as much detail as possible. The police officer took careful notes and then offered a hypothesis that sent shivers down my spine again. The man who collided with me last night could have been the killer. He had just left the scene, with the victim's blood still on him. And when he bumped into me, The blood accidentally got onto my shoulder. He wasn't sure if the bloodstain was left behind, so he secretly followed me from the parking lot to confirm. That's why I felt a distant gaze. That eerie feeling wasn't just my imagination. From following me, he knew exactly which apartment I lived in, and the next morning he came back, not to kill and cover his tracks, but to check. He pretended to be a police officer and asked about every detail of the night before to determine if I knew anything. If I had mentioned the collision then, or accidentally said I saw the bloodstain, I probably wouldn't have had the chance to be sitting here telling the story. I shivered, thinking back to everything. He had looked at me as if to memorize my face, or perhaps to plan something. I'd opened the door for a fake police officer. I chatted with him without any suspicion. Thank goodness for those beers, because maybe my mind was temporarily too foggy at the time. If I had said anything wrong, or reacted a little differently, I don't dare imagine what would have happened. Nearly a year has passed, and the criminal has still not been caught. The police have asked me to relocate and have placed me under special protection. Now I understand. What seem like small things are sometimes the final warning. Just a moment of doubt, or one time following your gut instinct, is enough to keep yourself safe. It's been 10 years, but I still can't forget that night. I was 11 years old, and my sister was 15. It was the weekend, and our parents had gone to a company party. They told my sister and me to stay home, lock the doors carefully, and look out for each other. But my sister had been locked in her room since the afternoon, blasting music and ignoring everyone. I was bored, so I went downstairs to the living room and turned on a movie. A long time passed, and I was totally focused on the film. Just as the police in the movie were about to expose the culprit, the entire house went dark. I froze for a few seconds, looking around at the thick blackness. I yelled my sister's name loudly, but I only heard the music, still echoing from upstairs. I called a second time, and she still didn't respond. I figured she had fallen asleep, so I decided to take action myself. I felt around for my phone on the table but couldn't find it. I must have left it in my room. A feeling of helplessness washed over me, like I was completely isolated in this dark room. Just then, a strange sound made my body freeze. It was a light scraping sound coming from the window. I stood stock still, listening to try and figure out what the sound really was. It was still just light, unidentifiable noises. A few minutes later, a voice suddenly spoke right behind me, so close that I felt a warm puff of air on the back of my neck. "Be quiet." My entire body turned to stone. It didn't sound like my sister, but I wasn't sure. I was too terrified to guess anything. I wanted to turn my head to confirm if it was her. But then a hand was placed on my shoulder, holding me still. The grip wasn't painful, but it felt like a warning. All I could do was stand still. "Don't look back," the voice commanded. I nodded like a controlled puppet. Then the person started giving me instructions. "Go down to the basement, find a hiding spot, then close your eyes, and absolutely do not move or make a sound until someone calls your name." Fear had paralyzed all my reactions. I could only obey. I reoriented myself in the space and started walking in the dark. The basement smelled musty and was freezing cold. I fumbled around and found the old cot, immediately crawling under it, curling up small, hugging my knees to my chest. The icy cement floor soaked through my clothes, making me shiver. I closed my eyes as instructed, but strangely not being able to see made all my other senses terrifyingly sharp. I heard everything. First, footsteps upstairs, the sound of doors opening and closing, and things being knocked over. Then a voice echoed down. Is no one here? I don't know when I drifted off to sleep. I don't know how long it was until I woke up to very loud noises from upstairs. I opened my eyes and realized I had fallen asleep. But as soon as I remembered the person's instructions, I squeezed my eyes shut again and lay still. It wasn't until I heard my mom calling out my name, filled with panic, that I dared to fully open my eyes. This time I knew someone had called my name, as instructed, but I still didn't dare crawl out, until frantic footsteps grew closer and closer. I was even more afraid, retreating deeper inside and clamping my hands over my mouth. Suddenly a flashlight beam shined directly into my face, making me squint, and a man pulled me out from under the bed. I stared blankly and realized it was a police officer. He yelled out, announcing that he had found me in the basement. The basement light turned on, and my parents and sister quickly rushed over. Immediately, my sister rushed to hug me tightly and burst into tears. She sobbed, saying she had snuck out to see a friend, and when she got home, she found the living room window shattered, things scattered everywhere, and me missing without a trace. Her voice trembled. I screamed your name, ran all over the house, and couldn't find you anywhere. I thought you had been taken. I panicked and called the police, and my parents too. At that moment, all I could do was cry and beg for you to be safe. But you were with me. You told me to hide and be quiet. She looked at me with a confused expression. What are you talking about? I wasn't home. I went out, and when I came back, I found this. The story I heard next was truly shocking. It turned out that before the power went out, my sister had indeed snuck out to see a friend. When she left, I was focused on the movie. When she returned, she found signs that the house had been broken into. Things were messy. The living room window was smashed, and I was gone. She immediately called my parents and the police. After a while of searching, they found me, sound asleep under the cot. I insisted many times that a voice had given me orders, but no one believed me. Everyone assumed that because I was so shocked, I had hallucinated. We went back to the living room. I stared blankly at the chaotic scene around me. Another police officer came over to explain that this was a routine burglary. Some valuable items had been stolen. My parents felt lucky that no one was hurt. My sister kept apologizing to me and our parents, and I couldn't stop thinking about the person who had talked to me earlier. The following week, my parents took me to see a doctor. She explained that a child's brain is very flexible, and in a dangerous situation, it can create false memories as a self-defense mechanism. The doctor reassured us that I would slowly forget and everything would be okay, but I haven't forgotten. Even now, I vividly remember the voice of the sister who commanded me that night. I believe it was a female burglar. She probably took advantage of the power outage to sneak into the house. What she was targeting was the family's property, and she had no intention of hurting me, or perhaps didn't want to cause a bigger incident. And I still often wonder what would have happened if I had turned around that day. There are some mysteries that are best left lying still in memory, just like I once lay still under the cot, eyes closed and waiting. I skipped school that day because I was sick. My head felt heavy, and my throat was raw and sore. My parents were busy with work and wouldn't be home until late afternoon. I was 13, so I could take care of myself. It was just me and our cat Scooter in the house. I tried to sleep, but the fever kept making my rest choppy. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, there was a knock at the front door. My parents hadn't mentioned anyone coming over. I was too tired and lazy to deal with a visitor, so I lay still, hoping the person would think no one was home and leave. But a moment later, the knocking came again, louder and longer this time. I sat up and immediately felt a little dizzy. I walked over to my bedroom window and looked down. A small pickup truck was parked in front of the house. On the side of the truck was a picture of a bug and the name of a pest control company. I saw a figure opening the storm door and peering inside the main door. I thought maybe my parents had scheduled a pest technician and just forgot to tell me, but I still decided to stay put in my room. I figured we could deal with any bugs another day. About 10 minutes later, I felt thirsty and thought he must have left, so I went down to the kitchen. The kitchen window looked out onto the backyard and a large wooden deck that connected to the living room through a big glass door. The sunroom was also back there. It was a small room with 3 glass walls, positioned between the deck and the living room. Mom usually left the sunroom door open so Scooter could go in and out freely. As soon as I walked into the kitchen and was about to pour a glass of water, I froze. I saw the man moving along the back of the house. He was out on the deck, walking along the wall of the house, going from window to window. Then he stopped, pressed his face against the glass, and even used his hand to block the sun to see clearly inside. He was wearing a company uniform and looked like a normal exterminator, but his actions were very strange. I backed up to stay out of his sight. I stayed quiet, hoping he would leave soon. A few minutes passed. When I looked again, I didn't see him on the deck anymore. I quietly moved into the hallway near the living room. I was startled to see the man was now inside the sunroom. He was looking down at Scooter, who was lying on the wicker chair. From where I stood, I could only see his back. I walked through the living room, went to the sunroom door, opened it sharply, and said loudly, "You can't be in here, please go outside." But my voice trembled, sounding like a child about to cry. Contrary to what I expected, he turned to look at me and smiled in a friendly way. "Oh, hi there. You must be Emma, right?" How do you know my name? Can I just step inside to check?" "It will only take a couple of minutes." My head was still fuzzy from the fever. My parents are at work. As soon as those words left my mouth, my mind flashed wide awake. No. Why did I say that? I just told him I was home alone. That was so stupid. I wanted to take the words back, but it was too late. I saw the look in his eyes change. He looked me up and down slowly. "All right, I'll come back another time." He turned and left calmly. I watched him go. The second he stepped off the deck, I immediately slammed the sunroom door shut. My hands were shaking so much it took 2 tries to turn the lock. I ran back upstairs and stood at the window to watch. He was back in his truck, but he didn't leave right away. He just sat there looking toward my house. Then he suddenly looked up toward my bedroom window. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding like it wanted to burst out of my chest. A few minutes went by, and he was still sitting there. I wondered why he hadn't left yet. Finally, the engine started, and the truck slowly drove away. Only after it was completely out of sight did I sink onto the floor. My whole body wouldn't stop shaking. I hugged my knees, trying to breathe normally, but I couldn't. I called my mom. The moment her voice came through the phone, I nearly burst into tears. I told her the whole story. I didn't call the pest control company today. You didn't open the door for him, did you? No, but he got into the sunroom, and he knew my name. Mom told me to lock every door and said she was coming home right now. About 20 minutes later, I heard Mom's car. I rushed downstairs and hugged her tight. Even then, I was still shaking with fear. A few minutes later, Dad also got home. Mom had called him. While Mom gave me some medicine, Dad did a full check of the house. There were no signs of anything unusual. Later, Mom suddenly remembered that our family had used that same pest control company once last year. They might have kept our information and sent someone for a routine checkup. Even though Mom later explained it might have just been a coincidence, I will never forget the feeling of helplessness and fear when I faced a stranger inside my own home. That day taught me a lesson about absolute caution and vigilance, even when you are inside your own house. It's Thanksgiving today. It's chilly outside, but inside our small house, warm laughter mixes with the faint smell of roasted turkey. The whole family is gathered together after the big meal, eating dessert and sharing memorable stories from past holidays. We laugh as my son tells a story about playing hide and seek with the neighborhood kids. Then, a memory from a Thanksgiving many years ago rushes into my head. It happened when I was 7 years old, and no matter how many holidays have passed, it has never truly left my mind. My family lived in a quiet neighborhood in the suburbs. Right next door was the house of Mrs. Edith, a woman famous for being odd and extremely lonely. Her house was always gloomy, with tall overgrown grass in the yard and curtains closed all day long. The kids in the neighborhood used to call her the witch. Whenever we played nearby, she would slide open a window, look down with cold, sharp eyes, and yell at us. For me, the fear was much worse. Every time I walked past her house, I would get a strange, chilling feeling down my spine. A few times I glanced up and saw Mrs. Edith standing there, staring at me from an upstairs window. After that, I would take a deep breath and run all the way home every time I passed her house. I always believed she hated all kids, especially me. That November, a few days before Thanksgiving, Mrs. Edith was found dead inside her house. Neighbors whispered to each other, it was about time. The police sealed the house, and later, no relatives showed up for her funeral. I heard my parents say she had no living family. Everyone in the neighborhood was used to her living alone for decades. On that Thanksgiving day, after our family dinner, I asked my parents if I could go outside and play with my friend. It was already dark, and the roads were still wet from an afternoon rain shower. When I walked past the alley behind Mrs. Edith's house, I suddenly stopped. A faint glow of light was leaking out from the back door of the sealed house. I stepped closer. The weak light inside shone through the crack in the door and onto the dusty, foggy glass pane. Through the thin layer of dust, I suddenly saw a figure. My breath caught in my throat. The person stood absolutely still, right behind the glass door. Even though the blurry glass distorted everything, I could still see that the person was looking straight at me. The most haunting thing was the two deep black eye sockets, empty like two bottomless holes. I stood there frozen, my arms and legs stiff, completely numb. Then, a creak sound came from the door, which jolted me awake. I let out a piercing scream and dashed out of the alley. I swore the figure I saw was definitely Mrs. Edith. When I got home, I didn't dare tell anyone. My parents would think I was hallucinating from watching too many horror movies. My friends would just laugh and call me a coward. I pulled the blanket over my head and lay still. I tried to tell myself I was just imagining things, but the fear just grew bigger and bigger, making my sleep restless all night long. A week later, the main road was blocked by a truck unloading furniture. With no other way to go, I was forced to take the small alley behind Mrs. Edith's house. I tried to walk as fast as I could, looking down at the ground. Near the end of the alley, I was surprised to see Mr. Adams standing there, quietly looking at Mrs. Edith's house. He lived in the neighborhood too, and everyone knew him. I greeted him with a shaky voice, relieved to see an adult there. He turned around and gave me a soft smile. The house is going to be torn down soon. I just nodded, and as I was about to walk on, he suddenly spoke. "Hey, you really look like that little boy." "What little boy?" Mr. Adam looked at me and then told me the story. Mrs. Edith once had a son, the same age as me, when he vanished. The little boy mysteriously disappeared right outside their front door one November afternoon. The police searched for months using every method possible, but they never found anything. The boy had simply disappeared into thin air. She lived with that pain, and it wore her down, changing who she was without her even realizing it. Edith didn't hate children. She just couldn't bear to see them without thinking of her own son. I stood there, feeling confused by Mr. Adams' story. Even though I didn't fully understand everything he said, strangely, I didn't feel scared anymore. I slowly turned my head and looked at Mrs. Edith's house one last time. Through the window glass, I saw a picture of a younger Mrs. Edith with a little boy. They were smiling very happily. Now that I am a father myself, I can finally understand how much loss can absolutely crush a person. Mrs. Edith wasn't a witch. She was a mother, trapped in a pain she had no one to share with. On a recent trip to visit my parents, I looked over at the spot where Mrs. Edith's house used to be. Her house is gone now, replaced by a bigger, beautiful new house where a happy family lives. I hope their happiness can offer some comfort to Mrs. Edith's soul, even if just a little bit. I'm Jerry, 27. This happened to me in my last year of college. It was around 1 a.m. when I was returning home from a Halloween party with my two buddies, Chris and Aaron. Halfway to my house, we saw a dark figure behind a tree on the other side of the street. It was so dark, we weren't sure if it was a person. Chris felt a need to observe it better. When he got closer to the street, he confirmed that it was a person. He was wearing a dark hoodie with his hands in his pockets. But what made him creepy is how still he was leaning against a tree staring at us. We passed him pretending we didn't see him. However, when we did, Aaron pretty accidentally looked behind and saw another figure dressed the same, leaning against a car. We thought it was a simple Halloween prank, but we were still spooked out. When I finally got home, I said goodbye to my friends who continued down the road to their houses. I was so tired I went to bed right away. I was woken up about an hour later by a loud thud. I got up, looked around the room, and saw a hooded figure behind my window. I had my curtains closed, but I didn't dare to open them. After a few seconds, he left. I got out of my room to check my house, and through the window of my living room, I saw the same figure who left after a few seconds as well. But that time, when I observed him better, he had a baseball bat in his right hand. This got me into a full panic now. I got my baseball bat when I heard the same thud from my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw another hooded guy who was unmistakably the same guy we saw on the street. That time, I could see their eyes better, which made clear they were up to no good. After a few seconds, he left, followed by his two fellows from the other sides of my house. Call me a coward or even a jerk, but I thought yet again that it was a Halloween prank, since they hadn't made any real attempts to break into my house. Also, I was that kind of guy before, so I hadn't called the cops. When I woke up the next morning, I got ready for work when I was called by Chris, who had spine-chilling news. At around 4 a.m., Aaron had been beaten up and robbed by 3 hooded hooligans. He barely had strength to get to the phone and dial 911. I've told him what happened to me, and he shockingly said the similar thing happened to him. At around 3 a.m., he was in a bathroom doing his thing when he heard a loud thud from a front door followed by another, but when he checked through the peephole, no one was there. Luckily, thieves seemed to be in a hurry, so they didn't steal everything. However, they had gloves, so they didn't leave any fingerprints and couldn't be identified. Aaron has an understanding for me not suspecting anything, but I still feel guilty for that. A message to all of you. Call the cops whenever you feel threatened, because you can never know anyone's intentions. Chris and I had a message as well on the note on the front windows of our cars. Happy Halloween. P.S. Good thing you locked your front door. I have been married to Kane for 6 months. We met on a dating app and we got married after knowing each other for a year. He works as a software engineer and I am a graphic designer. We both work from home, so we have a lot of time together. Our life is pretty calm. I thought I had found the right man to spend my life with. For last year's Thanksgiving, we went to Kane's parents' house in the suburbs for dinner. This is the holiday when my in-laws' family gathers the most. We arrived around 6 p.m. Kane's older brother and his wife had already gotten there. They have 2 small children who were running around in the yard. My mother-in-law was very happy to see us. She pulled me into the kitchen to help my sister-in-law prepare things and catch up on some gossip. My father-in-law was entertaining a few early relatives. Around 7 o'clock, enough relatives had arrived. Dinner was fun with about 20 people. We sat around the long wooden table, talking about our jobs and future plans. Kane was very attentive to me because this was my first Thanksgiving with his family. I felt pretty comfortable, and the food was great. I felt the warm, close family atmosphere. After we cleared the dinner plates, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law brought out the pumpkin pies. They were still slightly warm and smelled wonderful. My mother-in-law proudly introduced it, saying my sister-in-law had spent the afternoon preparing them. I helped my mother-in-law and sister-in-law pass the slices out to everyone. When it was my turn, my sister-in-law handed me a piece herself. Try this and see if it tastes good to you. I thanked her and took the first bite. The flavor honestly tasted as good as any high-end restaurant pie I had ever eaten. I took a second, slightly bigger bite. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through the roof of my mouth. I immediately spat the piece of pie out into my napkin, surprising everyone. In the pie piece, I saw something shiny under the lights. It was a needle. It was about 2 knuckles long. The sharp tip was still stuck with a bit of whipped cream and some blood. My hand was trembling as I held it. Kane turned to me and quickly snatched it out of my hand. Everyone gasped in shock. A few people rushed to check on me, and others started inspecting the pieces of pie they were eating. The children were also stopped from eating so their plates could be checked. "Are you okay? How did this even get in the pie?" I shook my head, unable to answer him because my throat was hurting badly. I could clearly taste the metallic, bloody flavor filling my mouth. Suddenly, my mother-in-law practically screamed. "What did you just say?" Everyone turned their attention toward her. Standing next to her were a few other relatives and my sister-in-law. She backed away. The uncle standing next to her also spoke up. I heard it too. She said, "You should have swallowed it." The air in the room froze. Kane jumped up, walked toward his sister-in-law, and yelled angrily, "What did you do to my wife?" My mother-in-law blocked the sister-in-law, her voice demanding that she stay right where she was. Kane's brother walked over, his face completely confused. I called for my husband in a weak voice. He immediately pulled me up to take me to the hospital. I heard fierce arguing as we got out to the car. The warm room from before now sounded like a battleground. Cain drove me away. In the emergency room, the doctor examined my injury. Luckily, it wasn't too deep, but it had caused a pretty long cut. The doctor disinfected the wound and gave me pain medication. When we got home, it was almost midnight. Cain opened his phone and read a bunch of texts from his mother. He showed me the phone. My mother-in-law recounted everything that happened after we left. In front of the whole family, my sister-in-law had confessed. Yes, I did it. She said she couldn't accept that Cain was being tricked and having his life ruined by me. She called me a barren woman because we had only been married for 6 months and didn't have a child yet. She claimed I had hidden the truth to trap Cain into marriage. I was too shocked to say anything. Cain had always been by my side and was very supportive. In the following days, my mother-in-law called many times to check on me. She said she was forcing my sister-in-law to go to counseling. Cain's brother also called to apologize on behalf of his wife. Cain was furious. He started looking for jobs in a different city. Within 2 weeks, we'd moved to a small apartment on the West Coast, nearly 300 miles from his parents' house. The wound in my throat slowly healed, but the pain when swallowing lasted for a whole month. One night, when the wound was almost completely healed, I asked Cain about his sister-in-law. He told me he was quite surprised by her change too. She had always been gentle and caring before. He couldn't understand why she would do something like that. I didn't say anything more and never brought up my sister-in-law again. A wife's intuition let me guess the hidden motive behind her actions, but I decided it was better to let the matter drop. Since that day, I haven't contacted my sister-in-law. We still make time to visit my in-laws, but we make sure to avoid overlapping schedules with my brother-in-law's family. Every Thanksgiving that passes, when I see pumpkin pie, I remember the taste from that year. Sweet, rich, and the faint flavor of blood in my throat. This is a true story. It all started when Ethan asked me to go camping. He said we needed a trip to relax after finals week, to find peace with God out in nature. We had been dating for over a year, and he always respected my decision to save myself for marriage. He came to church with my family every Sunday. Everyone loved him. We set off on Saturday morning in Ethan's pickup truck. He told me about his plan to start a charity fund after graduation and other projects in the rural area. I listened and felt so proud of him. Then suddenly he stopped the car. He said he saw something strange by the side of the road. Ethan told me to stay put while he went to check it out. About 10 minutes passed, and Ethan still hadn't returned. I got out of the truck to check the situation. Unexpectedly, I heard a sound behind me. Before I could react, a strong force grabbed me from behind. Someone covered my mouth with a cloth that smelled strongly of chemicals. I was completely panicked. I tried to struggle and scream, but the more I screamed, the more of the chemicals I breathed in. I heard Ethan yelling from a distance, and in the next second, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I panicked. I was lying naked on the forest floor. I was covered in scratches and bruises. It was dark, and the cold wind blew sharply across my skin. I couldn't clearly remember where I was or what had happened while I was unconscious. I called out Ethan's name in fear, and I was overjoyed to hear him answer. Ethan was lying a short distance from me. He was also naked and covered in wounds. Blood was running down from his forehead. When we found each other, we just held on tight and cried. He said there was a group of people wearing black robes. He thought it was a satanic cult. They had stolen everything. He tried to fight them, but couldn't. Everything happened too fast. but having him there made me feel a little less scared. We started walking for a while, hoping the spot wasn't too far from the main road. After walking for some time, it was still pitch black all around us. Ethan thought we needed to find shelter first. If we kept going, we would just get more lost and suffer terribly from the cold. Suddenly, Ethan spotted a canvas bag hidden behind a large rock. Inside, there were canned food, a knife, a lighter, and 2 sleeping bags. Ethan suggested that the people had forgotten these items. After we found a safe and warm spot, we ate some food. We encouraged each other, believing we would be able to get out of there the next day. But contrary to what we thought, we were stuck in the woods for many days. I was desperate and couldn't stop crying. I kept asking why God would let this happen to us. There were times when I just wanted to lie down and wait to die. But Ethan wouldn't let me give up. He hugged me, wiped my tears, and said we would get through this. He built a makeshift shelter using branches and the canvas bag. Every night, he sat guard to make sure no wild animals or those people came back. He tried to keep my spirits up. He told funny stories and sang hymns. I saw how exhausted he was. The wound on his forehead was getting infected. Ethan ate very little, always giving the food to me. On the 4th day, I ran a high fever. My body wouldn't stop shaking, even wrapped tightly in the sleeping bag. Ethan held me all night, using his body heat to keep me warm. He whispered prayers. I was touched, secretly thinking this was real love. The next morning, my fever broke, but then Ethan caught a fever. Ethan suggested I keep him warm the way he had done for me the previous night. Of course, I didn't refuse. He held me close, his hand gently stroking my arm and back. Lena, after everything that happened, do you still think we should wait until we get married? What do you mean? God put us together. You and I went through this together. This must be God's will, so I cherish you and our love even more. But I will not change my mind, Ethan. Ethan went silent and stopped all his actions after my reply. After a while, he fell asleep, surely from pure exhaustion. I also quickly drifted off to sleep. On the 6th day, we were almost completely desperate. The food was gone, and we were both severely dehydrated. Luckily, we were rescued. A hunter found us. He called the police, and we were immediately taken to the hospital. Fortunately, both of our health recovered quickly. There were no serious problems. We video called all the time to update each other on how we were doing. On the 3rd afternoon after being rescued, 2 police officers came to see me. They asked me about everything that had happened, especially the bag of supplies that Ethan found by accident. They showed me the purchase receipt and security camera footage of Ethan buying everything himself 3 weeks earlier. Then they showed me photos of the scene. There was absolutely no evidence that anyone else besides Ethan and me had been there. They checked the wound on his forehead. It didn't look like it was caused by an impact. It looked like he had intentionally hit his head on something, perhaps a tree trunk. Seeing that I had no reaction, they continued and showed me a video recording of the interrogation. Ethan sat in the interrogation room crying and confessing everything. Ethan had planned it for weeks. I love her too much. I thought if we went through something extreme together, if I saved her, she would see that we belonged together. There would be no reason left to wait. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted us to be closer. I immediately turned off the video. I couldn't listen anymore. I thought we had survived a nightmare through love. But the truth was, I had been living in a terrible play orchestrated by Ethan for a disgusting purpose. Ethan had to face the appropriate sentence, and I was left with deep psychological trauma. The days that followed were truly awful. but my parents were always by my side, caring about every emotion and thought I had. After a few months, I was doing better, but that doesn't mean I was completely over it. People say the most painful thing isn't being betrayed, but realizing you were never truly loved. What I thought was love was just carefully disguised manipulation. And the most horrible thing is that I'm ashamed to admit that I still remember the feeling of being held by Ethan on the night I had a high fever. My body still remembers that warmth, even though I know it was also part of his plan. I used to work as an assistant director for a cable television network in California. We specialized in producing shows that explored paranormal phenomena. The job had a good salary, flexible hours, and sometimes I even met a few celebrities. I thought I would stick with this career for a long time. That summer, we were assigned to film a special episode at an abandoned mental hospital outside the city. Our guest was a rising pop singer. I'll call her Madison to protect her image. Honestly, Madison's gentle image wasn't a good fit for these kinds of shows, but her management company wanted her to appear on our program to create a new, edgier impression. Madison was very popular at the time. I remember the planning meeting where our executive producer said this was a golden opportunity and we had to be absolutely meticulous. The filming day was near the end of August. It was unusually hot, even as it got close to evening. Our entire crew had 8 people: the director, the cameraman, lighting, sound, me, and 3 other production assistants. Madison arrived 2 hours late, accompanied by her personal assistant and makeup artist. She smiled, waved to everyone, and apologized for the delay. We started filming on the 3rd floor, which used to be the isolation treatment area. The hallway was long, lined with small rooms that had rusted iron doors. The smell of mold and dampness was overwhelming. Madison acted quite well. The initial script had her screaming when she heard a noise and clutching the male host's arm. Everything went normally until we entered room 17. The walls were peeling, the concrete floor was cracked, and a rusty iron bed frame sat in the corner. The air inside felt heavy and suffocating. I wasn't the only one who felt it. I noticed the cameraman looked uncomfortable, constantly shifting how he held the camera. The director cued us to start filming. Madison walked into the middle of the room as instructed. According to the script, she was supposed to read a few lines about how she felt, but Madison just stood still. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. The director asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. Then, her head began to tilt to the right, slowly, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled. Next, her eyes opened unusually wide, and both pupils rolled back until only the whites were showing. Each eye was looking in a completely different direction. Her face started to distort. One cheek drooped down while the other side scrunched up, making her face look twisted. I had never seen a human face contort like that before. "Madison?" her assistant screamed. But the person standing in the middle of the room wasn't Madison anymore. A guttural roar erupted. It sounded like an elderly man being choked. Then, she charged toward us with terrifying speed. One sound guy who was standing closest couldn't get out of the way fast enough. She grabbed his shirt tightly. Madison bit hard into his arm. I swear I heard a cracking sound. The sound guy screamed in agony. Her assistant and another production assistant rushed in to pull Madison away, but she was unbelievably strong. Madison flung her assistant, who fell hard into a corner. The other PA tried to hold her back and was bitten on the shoulder. With a tearing sound, most of the young man's ear was ripped, left dangling and bleeding non-stop. Everyone was screaming. The director yelled for an ambulance. The cameraman was still filming. I don't know if it was professional instinct or if he was too shocked to move. I stood frozen, my feet feeling glued to the ground. Then, the heavy smell of waste filled the air. Madison, with her face still distorted and still growling, had urine streaming down her legs. Everyone was horrified. A few seconds later, another foul smell appeared. She had also defecated. None of us dared to get close. We didn't even dare to move, afraid she would go completely insane again. After a few minutes, Madison suddenly collapsed. Her body went limp, like all her bones had been removed. We waited a few more minutes before daring to approach. By then, Madison was awake. She looked at the scene around her, then at herself, but showed absolutely no expression. Then she asked in a normal voice, "Have we started filming yet?" The ambulance arrived and took the 2 bitten crew members to the hospital. Madison was taken away by her management company. There were no police and no official investigation. Everything was handled discreetly because a celebrity was involved. The next day, I received a call from the network executives. The man's voice on the other end was cold. The show was completely canceled. All the footage had to be destroyed. No one was allowed to mention this incident in any form. A non-disclosure agreement, NDA, would be sent to everyone. That same afternoon, we signed the NDA. We didn't ask any questions. Anyone in this industry is used to keeping secrets. About a week later, we heard news that the sound guy, the first person she bit, had been in a car accident. He was driving on the highway and suddenly swerved straight into the median barrier. He survived, but had 3 broken ribs and a concussion. He told the police that he saw a woman with a distorted face sitting in the back seat through his rearview mirror. A few months after that, the production assistant whose ear was bitten was found collapsed in his apartment. His neighbors said they heard terrible screaming and quickly called the police. When they broke down the door, he was seizing on the floor, foaming at the mouth, with his eyes rolled back. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. I heard he couldn't speak anymore. He just made growling noises. As for me, after the incident, I struggled to sleep. I often dreamed of Madison's distorted image. I started being afraid of the dark. My mind constantly imagined ghosts and demons. I requested a transfer to another department, taking a simple administrative job. One time I ran into Madison's personal assistant at a coffee shop. She was much thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. "You don't look well?" I asked. Madison's assistant nodded slightly. She was taking a lot of medication. Even before we filmed that episode, she was under so much pressure and had a brutal schedule from the company. They kept piling on rules, contracts, and clauses. The pills helped her keep it together for a while, until they weren't enough anymore. I knew the she the assistant was talking about was Madison. I didn't say anything, choosing to listen silently. But what happened in that room was the result of having to hold on for too long. She really just broke. At this point, the assistant broke down crying. I sat with her until she calmed down and didn't ask anything else. Madison stopped appearing publicly. Her career was virtually frozen after the incident. There were rumors she was in treatment at a private psychiatric facility on the East Coast. Some people said she had left the entertainment industry for good. I worked until the end of that month and then quit my job. I'm no longer sure if what we witnessed that day was a paranormal phenomenon or just the result of a mind pushed to its absolute limit. But I know that since that day, I no longer look at the entertainment industry or people in the same way. This happened about 5 years ago during winter break. I was only 15 years old then. I was hosting a sleepover at my house with 5 of my best friends. Ethan, Liam, Aiden, Oliver, and Ben. We had all known each other since we were little kids. My parents were away for a few days, so Oliver's uncle Nathan came to watch us. Nathan was a funny and laid-back guy. We felt totally safe with him around. Nathan was professionally trained in martial arts and even coached MMA fighters. My family also owned 2 large bulldogs. What's better than doing whatever you want with your closest friends during winter break? Everyone arrived that afternoon, just as it was getting dark. It was typical winter weather, with heavy rain and a gloomy sky. The rain was pouring down, and the thunder sounded louder than usual. Nathan ordered pizza for the group, and we decided to watch a horror movie, as the stormy weather created the perfect atmosphere. We were halfway through the movie when the doorbell rang. Everyone guessed it was the pizza delivery guy, and Nathan went to open the door. Nathan looked through the peephole and saw the delivery guy. As Nathan described it, the man was about 6 feet tall and had a strange, unsettling expression. Nathan said the guy immediately gave him a bad vibe. Nathan opened the door, and the man handed over the pizza, but didn't say a single word, just gave a long, creepy smile. Nathan paid and quickly shut the door. Afterward, he told us it was one of the most awkward moments of his life. He had to just stand there while the man silently grinned at him. Even though we felt something was off, we tried to ignore it and kept watching the movie. By the time the movie ended, it was close to midnight. We decided to sleep together in the large living room upstairs. Aiden and I slept on the bed, and the others set up sleeping bags around us on the floor. Nathan stayed downstairs watching his favorite movie on the sofa. After about 30 minutes of talking, everyone gradually drifted off to sleep. I don't know how much time passed, but suddenly, Aiden was shaking my shoulder. His face looked worried and he whispered, "Do you hear that?" I listened closely, and there was a tapping noise coming from the window. At first I thought it was thunder, but then Aiden leaned in and said, "I think someone is trying to break in." My heart started pounding fast, and we stared at the window, completely paralyzed with fear. The tapping stopped. After the tapping stopped, a dark silhouette appeared right on the window glass. The person was wearing a hoodie, and I couldn't clearly see their face. I jumped off the bed and ran to the window, locking it quickly just as the guy tried to open it. Right at that moment, he smiled in a very unsettling and terrifying way. I only saw his distinct white teeth. The rest of his face was obscured. Aiden and I quickly woke everyone up. Then, the tapping returned, louder and more aggressive. He started yelling something, but we didn't pay much attention. The whole group ran straight downstairs to wake up Nathan. Nathan didn't hesitate at all. He went to open the dog's crate and led them straight outside. Aiden and I followed him, and the others huddled by the door. The sight we saw was terrifying. A ladder was leaning against the side of the house, placed right under the bedroom window. It turned out the tapping sound earlier was the ladder hitting the wall as the man climbed up. Nathan spotted muddy footprints leading to the backyard and ran toward the bushes. We saw the man crouching down under a bush in the garden, trying to hide. Nathan rushed in, the 2 dogs barking loudly beside him, and they lunged, biting the man's jacket. While the man was struggling with the 2 dogs, Nathan seized the opportunity and quickly threw a hard punch at his face. He yelled back at us, "Call the police!" It took the police a while to arrive because of the storm. The man was quickly arrested. The final detail that still haunts me is when the police officer said this wasn't the first time this man had engaged in such behavior. But the most terrifying thing was when Nathan swore that he was the same man who delivered our pizza that night. I still remember that creepy smile, and now I understand it wasn't the smile of an awkward delivery guy. It was the smile of someone who was planning something. Every time I think about what could have happened if Aiden hadn't woken up in time, or if Nathan hadn't been there, or if we didn't have the two dogs, I get goosebumps all over. I learned a very important lesson from this experience, that sometimes our intuition isn't meaningless. It's a warning we can't ignore. We felt the strangeness from the pizza guy, the signs of trouble right when he showed up, but we didn't act on it immediately. However, luckily, we still recognized the danger before it was too late. Around the spring of 2021, I started learning about the cryptocurrency Luna and the crypto market in general. In May 2021, a friend in the scene gave me a heads up. He told me that Luna, a crypto coin, had skyrocketed from 50 cents to $6 per token just a few months earlier. I did some research and learned that Luna was a reserve asset for Terra USD. This was an algorithmic stablecoin designed to stay at a 1-to-1 ratio with the US dollar. Basically, Terra USD was backed by tons of investors pouring millions into the company that created it, making it seem like a stable coin that couldn't possibly fail. Luna was the asset whose price could fluctuate, but because it was tied to Terra USD, it was practically guaranteed to increase in value over time. My friend waited for a small dip and bought into Luna at $5 per token. Just over a month later, that token price had more than quadrupled to $20.71. After a period of stability, Luna took a small hit, dropping to about $5 in May 2021. This was when my friend messaged me, saying it was the perfect time to buy in. He was practically 99% confident that Luna would recover strongly because of its link to Terra USD. His confidence is what convinced me, and I joked, if it crashes, we crash together. I had a total of $490 saved up, and I bought 100 Luna tokens at $4.81 each. My girlfriend at the time and my best friend Chris both thought I was insane for spending almost $500 on invisible coins. But then they slowly started to change their minds when, by August of the same year, Luna's value had climbed from $10 to $20, then $30 per token. This was especially true for Chris. I opened my crypto wallet on the investment app and showed Chris the amount of Luna I owned and their current value. When he saw how much the investment had grown, Chris curiously asked if I could convert that money to cash anytime I wanted. I explained that technically, I needed to sell those Luna tokens to another buyer in the market. However, with Luna's price surging, finding a buyer was easy, and the app I used could automatically execute the sale and transfer the money to my bank account quickly. I even had the chance to make $2,900 in profit in less than an hour. Chris went from thinking this was a scam to seeing the potential of crypto. I was honest that it was basically gambling, but Luna was the safest bet at the time, with long-term stability potential. For the rest of 2021, Luna's value kept rising, going from $30 to $60, then $93. I always advised Chris to follow the market, understand the system, and patiently wait for a dip so he could buy in. In late January 2022, Luna dropped sharply to about $45 per token. I called Chris and told him it was the perfect time. I guided him through setting up a wallet, and Chris decided to buy 300 tokens. I was a little shocked because I had only invested $4,000, while Chris, who wasn't wealthy, invested almost $14,000. Just over a month later, Luna had risen from around $50 to over $100 per token, and we believed Chris had made the right choice. Chris's investment was now worth almost $30,000, double his original money. By early April 2022, Luna hit almost $120 per token, and Chris believed we would be millionaires by the end of the year. I tried to pull Chris back to reality, saying I planned to sell my tokens as soon as they hit the $150 mark to lock in a massive profit. If Chris did the same, he would triple his investment. Chris was thrilled, thinking he would get rich because of Luna. I felt proud that I had not only made money, but also helped my best friend. Just a few days after our conversation, Luna started to fall sharply. In about 2 weeks, the price dropped from $120 to around $75 per token. Chris called me, and I reassured him with my usual line, "Every drop is just taking a breather before a new high." Sure enough, the next day, Luna rose from $75 to $90, then stabilized at around $95. In early May 2022, I remember checking my wallet once and saw Luna had dropped below $70, but I wasn't worried, believing it would soon bounce back as usual. Everything became a blur after that. May 11th, 2022 is a day that will forever be etched in my mind. I realized my whole world had been completely turned upside down. In just about an hour, Luna had plummeted from almost $70 to $33 per token. A few hours later, it sank to $16 and then to $13. At that point, my head was spinning. I had to take deep breaths to keep myself from throwing up or passing out. I immediately checked forums and message boards for clues. I prayed it was just a glitch or a miscalculation in the blockchain, but I found the opposite. Luna had completely collapsed and wasn't coming back. When I woke up the next day, my phone had about 50 missed calls and nearly 24 messages from Chris. He was in full-blown panic mode. His messages escalated from, "Did you see this?" to "Pick up the phone, you jerk." I called him back, but the call went to voicemail. About 20 minutes later, Chris rang the buzzer to my apartment. When I looked at the monitor screen, I saw Chris looked almost exhausted, not angry. I planned to let him in, make Chris a cup of coffee, and knew we were about to have an incredibly tense conversation. However, as I was about to open the door, Chris punched the door and hissed, "Open up." His voice was slurred like he was drunk. I suddenly felt a chill, afraid that a drunk Chris would smash up my apartment. He punched the door hard again and yelled, "Open this damn door, we need to talk." I spoke through the intercom, suggesting he go home and sleep it off. Then we could talk on the phone in the morning. I even offered to call him an Uber as an apology for not answering his calls. While I was explaining that I was sick, Chris started kicking the door repeatedly, each kick getting stronger. He screamed in a drunken rage that he would kill me when he broke the door down. I tried to explain why Luna collapsed, but he didn't care anymore and kept screaming. He repeated over and over, "Open the door, James. Open the door." I was afraid I might have to use violence to defend myself against a close friend. I knew I should call the police, but couldn't do that to him. "Please, man, let's talk when you've really calmed down." Chris only stopped when my neighbor shouted at him to quit it. I saw Chris raise his hands in the air and back away from the door. I assumed the neighbor had a gun pointed at him. Chris then stumbled away. The next day, I tried calling and texting Chris, but he didn't answer. I reached out on Instagram, and he had blocked me. I asked a mutual friend to pass along a message, but there was no response. I thought he would be mad for a week or two at most, because sooner or later, he had to realize it wasn't my fault. But the heartbreaking thing is, that never happened. From Chris's point of view, I was either too stupid and cost him his money, or I was part of a scam and stole his money. Either way, he was done with me. That night he screamed behind that locked door was the last time we ever spoke. I didn't throw away a laptop holding nearly $1 billion, but I threw away a friendship, and that friendship was worth more than any amount of money could buy. This story happened when I was 7 years old and was on the road to Goose Creek, South Carolina, with my mom. This trip was for our family to gather at my great-grandparents' house and celebrate Thanksgiving together. My dad was going to join us a few days later because of work. It was just my mom, me, and our luggage in the car. I was sitting in the back, engrossed in my iPad playing Minecraft, occasionally counting my collection of Beanie Boo's stuffed animals that filled my backpack. After a few hours in the car, I started getting restless because my legs were numb and I really needed to use the restroom. Mom glanced in the rearview mirror and asked if I was hungry. I nodded furiously. That question meant I would get to buy snacks, the kind Mom rarely allowed. I was excited when the car turned into the parking lot of a Quick Trip gas station. I jumped out of the car as soon as Mom turned off the engine. The cold air made me shiver, and my need to use the restroom became more urgent. After using the restroom, we walked along the aisles. I picked one of everything I liked and then headed to the checkout line. Finally, it was our turn. I remember Mom was halfway through paying when the door chime went off. I turned around and saw a man walk in. He was wearing dark clothes with his hood pulled up and dark sunglasses on. That made me stare at him intently. Mom also looked over and the man smiled in a very friendly way. I saw Mom smile and nod back out of politeness. But then, the man suddenly cut in front of us. He lightly tapped the counter and said, "Give me all your money." I saw the cashier frown and laugh, confused. A few silent seconds passed, and then the atmosphere suddenly got tense when the man slammed his hand down on the counter a second time with great force, making a loud noise that startled both me and Mom. The terrifying thing happened in the very next second. He pulled a black gun out of his jacket pocket and pointed it right at the cashier's face. I'm not joking. Open the safe now. All my attention focused on the gun in his hand. The cashier put his hands up, his face completely pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Suddenly, the bag of snacks in Mom's hand dropped to the floor. A can of Sprite rolled away with a loud hiss. I looked after it, intending to quickly run over and pick it up before all the soda leaked out. But Mom suddenly grabbed my wrist, pulling me hard toward the exit door. My brain couldn't process what was happening. I looked at Mom, looked at my favorite can of Sprite, and then looked at the man holding the gun. Mom's pull was stronger. My feet started moving, but my head was still turned back, looking. Mom pulled me running into the parking lot, pushed me into the back seat, and immediately locked the door. Then she jumped into the driver's seat. "Mom, my snacks. You already paid for them. You need to be absolutely silent. Silent." The car quickly started up and sped out of the parking lot at a speed I had never seen Mom drive before. I felt very distressed then. First, I regretted losing my favorite snacks, and then I wondered what was going on. I looked back toward the store and saw the man holding the gun to the cashier's head. He looked very angry, yelling something loudly, but we were too far away to hear. Mom drove in silence for a few minutes, then pulled out her phone and called the police. Her voice was shaking as she recounted what had just happened. When she hung up, Mom sighed and kept driving. I didn't say anything either. We sat in silence for the rest of the drive to my great-grandparents' house. After we finished bringing the luggage inside, Mom immediately turned on the TV to check the news. The image of the Quick Trip gas station appeared on the screen. The news anchor spoke in a serious voice, saying that an armed robbery had occurred. The police arrived at the scene about 10 minutes after receiving the call, but it was too late. The cashier was dead from a single gunshot to the head. The perpetrator had escaped with less than $300. Mom went still, then started to cry. My great-grandmother hugged Mom to comfort her, and my great-grandfather came over to me. My great-grandfather asked if I was hurt or overly scared. I shook my head. Truthfully, I didn't fully understand everything back then. I only remembered the bag of snacks that we left behind. More than 10 years have passed, but every time I go into a gas station, I feel anxious. I am wary of everyone, especially those who act friendly. Now I understand that everything Mom did back then was to try and protect me. In that moment of terror, Mom had only one goal: to pull me out of danger before I could witness the worst thing. We might even have become his next targets. That day, I was just a child who regretted leaving behind a bag of snacks. But what I didn't know was that I was only seconds away from death, and my mom had decisively and calmly saved me from it. I remember that night clearly, like it happened just yesterday, even though a week has passed. The trembling feeling when I think back still makes me grip the steering wheel tight whenever I drive at night. It was a road trip from Atlanta up to Wilmington, just me and Milo, my pit bull mix. It was around 10 p.m., and the night was spitting a cold drizzle. I needed to stop for gas and let Milo take a break because we had been in the car for a few hours. My GPS directed me to a gas station that was tucked away off the main road. Not a single person was around. There was no sound at all except for the rain hitting the canopy and the noises Milo made. I opened the car door, and the cold draft rushed in, making me shiver. I pulled my wool coat up higher. It was the only warm jacket I had with me. Milo jumped out, pulling tight on his leash, but he waited patiently while I pumped the gas. Suddenly, I noticed someone standing next to the pump. The person walked closer. It was a tall, thin man who was dressed very lightly for the weather. He stood silently, watching me. I didn't pay much attention and focused on finishing the gas. He spoke up right as I finished paying at the pump. "Excuse me for bothering you. I'm homeless. I can't help you. I'm sorry." I said that and immediately turned to take Milo for his break. I thought he had left after I turned him down, but he hadn't. When I walked back with Milo, I jumped. He was still there, standing closer to my car than before. "Please, I'm really starving." His eyes were fixed on me and didn't move. Looking at the man who was soaking wet and visibly shaking, a feeling of guilt started to creep into my mind. "I don't have any food in here, but I can give you some cash to buy something in the convenience store." He stared at me, seeming unsatisfied. His gaze slowly moved down, and then he suddenly pointed straight at me and spoke. "That jacket looks warm. I really need it." My heart pounded. His voice was no longer pleading, it was demanding. I took a step back, and Milo next to me started to tense up. "You can't have this jacket. I can only help you with some cash." When I refused, his attitude changed instantly. Then he moved toward me, so fast that I didn't have time to react. His hand grabbed my shoulder tightly. I cried out, trying to pull back, but he held on firm. His other hand grabbed my other shoulder, tightening his grip. I could feel him starting to pull me away. Panicked, I screamed, "Let go of me right now!" And right then, Milo had a strong reaction. He started growling fiercely and continuously, his fur bristling, his fangs showing. The man flinched, and his grip loosened a little. I used that moment to swing my shoulder hard to break free from him. I backed away and loudly threatened that I would unleash Milo if he bothered me again. As soon as I finished speaking, Milo let out a louder growl and then barked very aggressively. He was ready to lunge at any second. The man looked at Milo, then back at me. I could clearly see his frustration as he let go. He backed up, muttering something under his breath. I didn't hesitate. I pulled Milo back, opened the car door, pushed Milo in, then jumped in myself and drove away as fast as I could. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me a few seconds to start the engine. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the man still standing there watching me. But the very next second, he turned away, walking quickly toward a black SUV parked in the dark corner of the station. I hadn't even noticed it was there before. He opened the door and climbed into the passenger seat. I slammed the gas pedal, speeding out of the station faster than I'd ever driven before. Milo was barking frantically in the back seat, but I didn't stop until the lights of the gas station completely vanished in my mirror. My hands were shaking uncontrollably on the wheel, and tears streamed down my face. I realized it. He wasn't homeless. He was faking it. He definitely had an accomplice. I called the police to report the incident. I gave them the exact address of the gas station, along with the details of the black SUV. I hadn't seen the license plate. I also couldn't recall any distinctive features of the homeless man. The police said they would investigate, but to this day, I haven't received any specific information about the man. Since that night, I never stop at isolated gas stations. I avoid going out after dark, and if I absolutely have to, I always take Milo with me. That loyal friend is the reason I survived. But most of all, I learned one lesson. Kindness without caution can become a deadly vulnerability. 6 years ago, when I was 13, that winter became a nightmare I will never forget. That day, my mom drove over 300 miles to her hometown to care for my grandfather, who was seriously ill. It was just my dad, my 16-year-old brother Dean, and me at home. Dad worked at the auto shop from morning until night, and Dean had a full day of school, so I was usually home alone most of the time. I was used to the silence of the empty house. I figured out plenty of things to do to pass the time. That afternoon, I was standing by the stove, getting ready to make a grilled cheese sandwich. I put the skillet on the burner and turned around to grab the jar of peanut butter from the pantry. Suddenly, I heard a strange sound from the front door that made me freeze. It was a light, scratching noise, something completely out of the ordinary. I stopped and listened. The sound kept happening. I walked toward the living room. As I got closer to the front door, I saw the doorknob start to rattle, turning back and forth. I thought maybe it was my dad or brother coming home early, so I almost spoke up. But then, a different noise rang out. It sounded awful, like someone was trying to break the lock. I was sure it wasn't family, because they would easily open the door with a key, and anyone we knew would knock politely. Luckily, the deadbolt was still engaged. I quickly ran back to the kitchen and saw the cast iron skillet still on the stove. I turned off the burner and grabbed it, feeling the handle scorching hot even through my hand. I squeezed into the small pantry next to the kitchen. I gently pulled the door shut, not all the way, to avoid making noise, and took out my phone. I quickly typed a message on social media. "Someone is breaking into my house. Please call the police to 247 Maple Street." I hit post and prayed that someone would see it in time. Right after the post successfully went up, the front door was thrown open. He was inside the house. I heard slow, careful footsteps. He seemed to be walking around the living room. I heard the sound of cabinet drawers being pulled open and things being rummaged through. Then the footsteps moved toward the kitchen. I bit my lip, trying not to make any sound, but my whole body began to shake uncontrollably. The footsteps stopped right outside the pantry door. I could hear his breathing right on the other side of the thin door. The only sound in my head was my pounding heart. I could only sit there, clutching the skillet, and wait. Then the door burst open. I saw his shadow fill the doorway, a tall man looking directly down at me. For that moment, time seemed to stop. I saw a look of surprise flash across his face when he discovered I was hiding there. Then his mouth opened, as if he was about to say something. My mind went blank. Only one thought flashed like lightning. If he touches me, I will die. And immediately after that, my body acted before my brain could catch up. I jumped up, using all the strength I had left to swing the hot skillet straight at his head. I didn't aim, I just raised it and swung down with all my power. My arm went numb from the impact. He stumbled and collapsed. His eyes rolled up and his mouth hung open, as if he wanted to scream, but couldn't make a sound. The next second, his whole body fell. I stood there, still holding the skillet high, my whole body shaking uncontrollably. The man lay motionless in front of me, blood spreading onto the floor from his head. I stared at him in the widening pool of blood. I didn't understand why I had acted that way. Maybe the fear was so intense that my survival instinct, the need for self-defense, flared up stronger than ever. I waited, but he didn't move. My knees felt weak, and my hands were still tightly gripping the skillet. I didn't dare step out of the pantry, and I didn't dare turn my back on him. I was afraid he would wake up and get angry. Then, I heard police sirens wailing outside. Someone had seen my post and called the police, but even when I heard the sirens, I still couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the man on the floor. 2 police officers rushed into the house, their guns drawn. They saw the scene. One quickly restrained the man. The other came over to me. "Everything is okay, sweetie," the officer said, but I just felt numb. They called my dad home. He was frantic, constantly asking if I was okay, but I couldn't answer any of his questions. The police quickly took the man away. His life wasn't in danger, but the head wound was quite serious. I got a physical checkup and was quickly transferred to see a therapist. The investigation that followed revealed things that gave me chills. In the pocket of the man's jacket, the police found a long switchblade knife and a roll of black duct tape. His car, parked right outside the house, was filled with frightening items: rope, large trash bags, little girls' clothing, and another knife. Even worse, when they opened the glove compartment, there was a single photograph inside, a picture of me, taken from outside the living room window. I was sitting on the sofa watching TV. He had been watching me. He had planned the break-in. It took me almost 2 months of therapy, and since that day, I have never felt safe being home alone again. I survived, but a piece of my childhood was lost forever, and I learned that being watchful and careful is never too much. This is a true story. I never thought a simple dinner could turn into the worst nightmare of my life. That night, after leaving a pub with my wife and kids, I was driving down the empty roads on the edge of the city. The clock on the dashboard read 12:30 a.m. The streetlights cast faint yellow streaks on the damp asphalt, and there was no one else around. My wife was next to me, holding her phone and reading local news. The 2 children were asleep after a fun evening out. "I just read this news. You know? The day before yesterday, a man was attacked by a guy dressed as a clown carrying a knife," my wife said, her voice sounding a bit worried. The police said there have been a few more similar incidents and believe they're copying each other. It's turning into a crazy trend. I nodded, but didn't say anything, thinking they were just idiots looking for attention. I turned onto the familiar road that led home. The streetlights were sparser here, and the darkness was heavier. As the car rounded the curve, I slammed on the brakes because a tall figure was standing right in front of my car's hood. The person was wearing a red and white striped suit, heavy makeup, with a ridiculously large, weird painted smile and a messy orange wig. For the first second, my brain refused to process the image. He started waving his hands toward us. The motions were frantic, but it wasn't clear if he was asking for help or signaling us to stop. Oh my God. My wife's scream woke up the two children. They looked out. One let out an excited gasp, while the other burst into terrified tears. My foot was still on the brake, but my mind was racing wildly. I remembered all the crime reports my wife had just mentioned minutes ago. My hands began to shake. The clown started walking toward us slowly. In the headlight beams, his shadow stretched out, combined with his weird, waving motion. I stared, trying to see if he was hiding anything. But in my mind, I already assumed he had a knife and definitely had bad intentions. Back up, honey." My wife's scream seemed to snap me out of it. I immediately shifted into reverse, and as if that was the signal he was waiting for, he started rushing toward the car very quickly. His mouth was wide open in a strange posture, like he was roaring, but there was no sound. In his ridiculous costume, he looked scarier than anything I had ever seen in a movie. I turned the wheel, but my hands were shaking, causing the steering wheel to slip. The car swerved. My wife and children's terrified screams and cries were loud in my ears. The sound of him running closer and closer made me panic more. The clown was running alongside the car. He slapped the driver's side window hard, his face pressed against the glass, only inches from mine. His eyes stared straight into me. His smile, under the car light, made it look like fresh blood was dripping from his mouth. He yanked the door handle. He yanked it again, harder, and the whole car shook. My daughter's crying and continuous calls of "Daddy" made the feeling I had at that moment not fear anymore, but pure anger. He was threatening my family, and I would not allow it. I had only one thought left in my head. Get out of here, protect my wife and children at all costs. I floored the gas pedal. The clown didn't jump back. He still clung to the door handle, as if challenging me. I took a few final seconds to think, then slammed my foot down on the gas. The car surged forward. He let go at the last second. His body narrowly scraped past the driver's side window by less than a hand's width. The car sped away, leaving his figure behind in the rearview mirror. I didn't dare take my hands off the steering wheel until we got home. Inside the house, I immediately locked the doors and turned on every light. My wife was hugging the two children, and all three of them were crying. I held my wife and kids tight and comforted them. For the first time in my life, I understood what prey felt like when being hunted, not in a movie, but in reality. After calming down a bit, I called the police. I worked with them until 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the time. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the clown's face pressed against the glass, his eyes staring straight at me with that bloody red smile. After an investigation, the police still haven't caught him. They checked security cameras and questioned residents in the area, but that section of the road was isolated. Almost no recording devices were operating at that time. Since that night, I never let my car run low on gas. I never let my phone battery run out. I make a habit of checking the door locks 3 times before I go to sleep. And I never drive down that road after midnight again. I had a close-knit group of friends that formed in our sophomore year of college. We rented an old apartment near campus and lived together. After graduation, even though we all got jobs and started our own lives, we kept up the habit of meeting regularly. We shared stories about our exhausting workdays, our broken relationships, and our upcoming plans. In the group, there was Mark. He was a year older than us, and everyone knew Mark had feelings for me. I didn't reject him, but I didn't return his affection either. I truly valued him as a person. Everything started changing last fall. Our get-togethers weren't as comfortable as before. Slowly, I realized I was being left out. My messages in the group chat were often ignored. Once, I accidentally saw photos of the whole group having a picnic on a friend's social media page, and no one had mentioned it to me. I called and asked about it, but I only got a flimsy excuse that it was a sudden, unplanned meeting. I kept wondering what had happened and when exactly I had been cut out of that inner circle of friends. Then something terrible happened. One of the guys in our group had a serious car accident on the freeway. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, and his face was severely injured, almost unrecognizable. I hurried to the hospital after Mark called to tell me the news, but the friends who had arrived earlier wouldn't let me visit him. I was genuinely shocked by how they treated me. I challenged them, asking why, but they all avoided the question. One of the girls walked up to me and looked at me very coldly. "None of us told you about the accident." "How did he know?" "It was him, wasn't it?" "You need to be careful. He is not simple." I didn't understand what she was implying, but the person she mentioned could only be Mark. Yet Mark had always been kind to everyone. The following months were the darkest time in my life. I lost my entire group of close friends, people I had considered family. My job was stressful, and I was incredibly stressed out. Only Mark stayed by my side, listening and caring for me. One winter evening, Mark came to my apartment and confessed his feelings. "I've always waited for this moment. I regret not telling you before and letting you start relationships with other people. Then you'd break up, only to start a new relationship. I was desperate. But I promised myself I would always be there whenever you needed me most. But now everyone else is gone, and it's time for me to say everything." I cried heavily. Honestly, I didn't love Mark in the way people usually talk about love, but I felt his sincerity, and because of him, I had gotten through the darkest time. So, I agreed to be Mark's girlfriend. We started dating. Mark continued to take care of me attentively. I got used to having him in my life. After almost a year, our lives were stable in a new city, and Mark proposed. I felt happy and lucky to have found such a good man. One afternoon, while I was tidying up Mark's bookshelf to prepare for us to move in together after the wedding, I accidentally knocked over a stack of old files. I bent down to pick them up and saw a blue notebook. Inside were notes in Mark's handwriting. The dates were clearly marked. The names of every friend in the group. Small, trivial stories had been recorded, analyzed, and turned into plans. I shuddered when I read the specific notes, culminating in the line, November 20th. Finally, that jerk knows when to shut up below. That was the detail of my friend's accident. Mark had known my friend's daily driving route. He had made an anonymous call to a truck driver, pretending to be from a logistics company and giving incorrect delivery timing information. He calculated the exact moment the two vehicles would meet on the freeway and indirectly caused an accident that looked random. I sank onto the floor. The room was spinning. So, the entire thing was part of his plan. I was like a puppet in a play, manipulated from start to finish. A little while later, Mark got home. He opened the door and saw me holding the notebook. His face went blank, and his eyes were strangely empty. "You don't understand. It was all because I love you too much. They don't deserve to be around you. Only I truly understand you. This isn't love. This is sick. I love you. You aren't going to leave me, are you? We are done." Mark moved closer, but I quickly stood up and rushed toward the door. I grabbed my car keys and ran away without taking anything else. I drove to a coworker's house for help. For all my belongings at the apartment, I hired a cleaning and moving service to transport them to a new place. I wasn't going back there because I was afraid of seeing Mark again. And just as I suspected, he didn't give up. He constantly messaged and called me from strange phone numbers. Pictures of me, taken from a distance, were sent to my personal email. He was openly showing that he was stalking me. I moved, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media accounts. I sought help at a victim support center and learned self-defense. I hired a lawyer, filed for a restraining order, and sent all the evidence to the police. I was absolutely determined to do everything I could to reclaim my freedom. Mark hasn't been arrested yet, but he can't get close to me anymore. After moments of being strong, I cried and broke down a lot. But after calming down and thinking things over, I felt lucky. I had discovered his true face before it was too late. All this time, I had been manipulated and controlled by what I thought was genuine love. Through my story, I want to advise you all. Before getting married, be absolutely sure you truly know the person you're going to spend your life with. Not just who they are when they love you, but who they are when they are angry, hurt, or don't get what they want. This is a true story. I've been driving a long-haul semi-truck for 20 years, starting when I was 20. Now that I'm 40, I thought I'd seen everything on these highways: accidents, breakdowns, even police chases. But nothing compares to what I witnessed that afternoon on the Nevada desert highway. It was about 5 p.m. and the sun was still blazing hot. This stretch of road is always empty, with only a few trucks scattered around. I was listening to the local radio. Suddenly, in my rear-view mirror, I saw something blazing red appear. The engine noise was a deafening roar, cutting right through the soundproofing of my truck cab. In an instant, a red motorcycle zipped past me, swerved into the left lane, and vanished. All in less than 5 seconds. I sighed and shook my head. This was the typical driving of some kid with a new bike who thought they owned the speed limit. About 10 minutes later, as I started up a gentle slope, I saw the red motorcycle again, parked on the shoulder. The rider was bent over, adjusting something mounted on the front, which looked like a camera. I drove past, but less than 3 minutes later, that roar came up from behind, again, even more frantic this time. The red motorcycle sped past me at a terrifying speed, overtaking me once more before shooting off ahead. I muttered, "What kind of maniac drives like that this late in the day?" Not long after, I saw the road sign ahead, a sharp, high-grade U-turn curve. I lightly tapped the brake, slowing down. These curves are like death traps for large vehicles like mine. Then, in the distance, I saw the red motorcycle appear ahead again. The road curved like a U-shape, hugging the dry, rocky mountainside on the right, while on the left was a steel guardrail and a sheer drop. He was heading toward the curve at an absolutely terrifying speed. My heart seemed to skip a beat when I realized he wasn't leaning into the curve. There was no sign of braking. The motorcycle just barreled straight toward the sharp bend, where the road turned almost 90 degrees. The tires screamed for less than a second. Then came a horrific crash. I slammed on the brakes, and the truck shook violently. I saw the entire scene unfold. The rider flew off the bike, his body soaring through the air before hitting the lower edge of the steel guardrail, the part where the metal beam meets the vertical post close to the road surface. The impact happened with incredible force. The helmet shattered, plastic pieces flying everywhere, mixed with other things. I sat there, gasping for breath, staring at the scene about 30 feet in front of my truck. I immediately opened the door and stepped out. My legs felt weak, and my head was spinning. I took a few steps before I had to stop, kneeling on the side of the road and throwing up. The victim's head and face were not intact. It was mangled and crushed beyond recognition. Blood, bits of tissue, and even an eye, mixed with oil and motorcycle debris, spread across the asphalt nearby. I saw a nearly shattered cell phone, but the screen was still on. It was still recording everything. I turned away, pulled out my own phone, and called 911. The police and ambulance arrived. They sealed off the scene, and the body was covered with a tarp. They said the victim couldn't be identified by sight. They would have to use the vehicle's VIN and fingerprints. I stood there watching them work, feeling hollow. A few days later, the police contacted me. They needed a formal statement to complete the case file. I learned about the victim. He was a 22-year-old guy named Nick. In the backpack found at the scene, alongside a few personal items, was a small notebook meticulously recording his monthly income and expenses. On the last page of the notebook, there was a hastily written sentence. Kayla said, "I'm boring. I'll make her remember me forever." The officer told me that after analyzing the dashcam data and checking the speed via the skid marks, they determined Nick was going up to 120 miles per hour at the moment of impact. By interviewing family and friends, the police also found the motive behind the reckless act. Nick's girlfriend, the girl named Kayla, said Nick was too nice and boring. She wanted to see him be stronger, more daring. Nick couldn't accept that he wanted to prove that he wasn't as ordinary as she thought. He pooled together months of hard-earned savings to buy the sport bike, then planned to film a truly impressive high-speed video to send to his girlfriend. I didn't know Nick. I never even saw his face clearly when he was alive, but in the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about him. A young man with his whole future ahead of him, and it all ended because of a single, split-second bad decision. Nick thought he needed to be strong to be approved by others. He believed that speed and danger would prove his self-worth. But reality showed the opposite. Life is too fragile to gamble on risky moments. Never live to prove yourself to others. Don't let someone else's words define your life's value. And most importantly, never bet your life on impulsive moments just to get approval. I still drive my truck, still run those long routes. Every time I pass that spot, I look over at the steel guardrail where the accident happened.